Hello and welcome to Chinese Novel Audiobook. Explore our playlist for more captivating novels, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 41, Nightfall Approaches. Faced with his master Yusuf's inquiry, the black-robed figure nodded slightly. The believers have successfully infiltrated the residential areas of the Holy Square. All 15 vials of chaos essence have been placed. The blue liquid, just injected into the gray rat, causing its mutation, was none other than chaos essence. It possesses an incredibly terrifying corruptive power, capable of turning any creature it touches into a horrific chaos monster. Yusuf had expended vast resources to refine those 15 vials of chaos essence. These were his gifts to Eden Grant and the Royal District. Once these gifts were unleashed, they will bring immense suffering to the Royal District. In fact, Yusuf had been closely monitoring the situation in the Royal District, fully aware of Eden Grant's uselessness despite his noble bloodline. However, lately, Yusuf had found himself unable to fully grasp Eden's actions. To be precise, since the failed assassination attempt Yusuf had meticulously planned over 5 years, Eden had become unpredictable. Yusuf had activated a sleeper agent who had been hidden for decades, Eden's personal maid. The maid, using the most secretive means, performed a sinister ritual, intending to fully corrupt Eden. The ritual had indeed succeeded. Yet, Eden had somehow survived, an unbelievable outcome. How did he resist the corruption of chaos? Afterward, Eden's behavior became erratic and completely irrational. Amid the internal and external turmoil of the Royal District, he squandered enormous manpower and resources organizing the Emperor Ascension Festival. What kind of foolishness is this? Regardless, Yusuf was determined to seize this opportunity. To deliver a devastating blow to the Royal District, plunging it into panic and chaos. The plan was proceeding smoothly. At present, the believers of the Broken Eye cult, carrying those terrifying vials of chaos essence, had infiltrated the residential areas near the Holy Square. Tens of thousands of citizens lived there, and with the current strength of the Royal District, it was impossible to search them all. If the Royal District failed to deal with the believers and the chaos essence in time, then on the day of the Emperor Ascension Festival, the loyal followers would unleash the chaos essence into the crowds, creating countless chaos monsters. It would be a horrific celebration of suffering. Chaos creatures would rampage through the densely packed crowds, slaughtering in front of the Holy Emperor's statue. It would be the ultimate desecration. The bloodshed and suffering would give rise to even more terrifying chaos creatures. Even if the Royal District managed to resolve the disaster, the losses would be catastrophic. Of course, the Royal District had another option, which was to preemptively purge the residential areas. Yusuf knew that the Royal District's High Commandant, Bayev, would certainly propose this swift and decisive solution. The iron-blooded Commandant was well versed in such matters. But it didn't matter. If the Royal District initiated the purge, the believers would unleash the chaos essence during the cleansing. Chaos monsters would then rampage through the residential areas. The tens of thousands of citizens would become fuel, equally capable of giving rise to powerful chaos creatures. Yusuf had already made preparations to spread the word that the Royal District had ordered the slaughter of innocent residents. A chaos attack, combined with a massacre ordered by the governor, would plunge the Royal District into a cloud of fear and despair. It would strip Eden Grant of all authority and prestige. This was Yusuf's plan. No matter how the Royal District reacted, it would play into his hands. When the believers successfully evaded the enforcers and smuggled the chaos essence into the residential areas, it marked the beginning of the Royal District's downfall. Yusuf could already envision Eden's distressed expression. He silently mocked the useless governor, imagining him terrified. However, Eden was unaware that an even greater disaster was looming. Yusuf could hardly wait to see the Royal District fall and the governor kneel before him, begging for mercy. And he, Yusuf, would be crowned as king. He would become the new and supreme ruler of Urth. In the administrative residential area, the Rapp family was saying their prayers before dinner, giving thanks to the Holy Emperor and the governor for the food they were provided. Ever since the governor had announced the restoration of food rations, they no longer had to rely on corpse starch as their primary food source. Deville looked at his smiling mother and sister, his heart filled with hope. Tomorrow will be better. The same was true for many others in the nearby residential areas. Hope had returned to their eyes. Food rations had been restored, almost twice the previous amount. Though it was still not enough to fully satisfy their hunger, at least they no longer feared starvation. People talked about the governor's mercy. There were rumors that the governor had found an endless supply of sawdust bread, and everyone could eat their fill. Others whispered that they had noticed a subtle change in the Holy Emperor's statue. Surely, it was a sign of divine intervention. Some of these rumors had been spread by Eden's orders, while others were the people's own imaginations. Overall, things seemed to be improving. There was a flicker of hope in people's hearts, a glimmer of anticipation for a better future. But they didn't realize that all of this was an illusion. So fragile, it could not withstand any significant blow. Now, as darkness approached, shadows flitted through the corners of the residential area. Occasionally, a faint blue glow would flash. It was an otherworldly and sinister light. That was the chaos essence, a terrifying substance capable of bringing immense suffering. The cultists were on high alert, ready to unleash these powerful forces the moment the purge began. Perhaps tonight, everyone in this place would face death, with no survivors. Outside the governor's office atop the spire. Bayev waited patiently. He had already assembled the armed forces of the royal district and had drawn up the plans for a full-scale purge. The sacrifice of tens of thousands in exchange for the safety of the royal district was undoubtedly worthwhile. Now, all that remained was the governor's decision. Inside the office, Eden watched the sun set completely, and he made his final decision. He couldn't do it. He couldn't order the purge, he couldn't sacrifice so many lives. If he gave the order to slaughter so many, it would undoubtedly betray his principles. It would be a betrayal of what he represented in the warp. Because Eden Grant stood for hope. He had already felt it, the flickering sparks of hope coming from the residential area. These hopes gathered together, flowing into the psychic core. There were now 50,000 units of hope. The power of the small sun had been further restored. Those devout citizens, offering their hope as sustenance, were also saving themselves. For their governor had found a way to resolve this. Eden gazed toward the distant statue of the Holy Emperor, closed his eyes, and connected his consciousness to the psychic core hidden within the statue's head. As his awareness merged with the core, a vast psychic wave spread out, enveloping all the residential areas surrounding the Holy Square. Chapter 42, Found It. In a state of psychic sensing, Eden overlooked the 6 or 7 residential areas surrounding the Holy Square. The size of these areas varied. The one closest to the Holy Square was the administrative residential area, filled mostly with crowded apartment buildings with small activity spaces between them. Further out were several towering, multi-story complexes, each one like a self-contained world. Space was incredibly scarce here, with structures packed tightly together. Like stacked shipping containers, these buildings were divided into cramped single rooms, resembling windowless cages. On the outskirts was a sprawling shantytown, where most homes were made from dilapidated materials, with some being nothing more than simple metal shacks, barely providing shelter. These shantytown structures were arranged in a chaotic and tangled fashion, dim and narrow, forming an almost labyrinthine maze. Each of these residential areas had its own unique and highly complex ecosystem, filled with countless hidden and dark spaces. Conducting a thorough search of these areas would be extremely difficult. However, for the current Eden, such a task was no longer impossible. Now endowed with divine light power, his psychic senses could easily cover all the residential areas that needed to be searched. In this state, the power of hope was being consumed rapidly. But that wasn't enough, he needed a clearer and more precise reading. Gritting his teeth, Eden increased the depth of his psychic scanning, completely enveloping the residential areas with his psychic awareness. With such a deep level of psychic sensing, he could even see the tiniest of insects within the residential areas. Everything within the range of his psychic perception was now under his observation. However, this also meant that the amount of information flooding his brain increased exponentially. A massive surge of data poured into Eden's mind, nearly overwhelming him. A sharp pain struck, causing him to grunt, almost breaking his connection with the psychic core. Yet Eden held on and successfully obtained the information he was seeking. He found the cultists. There were dozens of them, hidden throughout the residential areas, disguised as ordinary residents. Eden quickly locked onto the exact location of each cultist and marked them. At the same time, he sensed an even more terrifying and malicious presence, chilling to the core. It was something no living person could emit. It was the pure evil of chaos. These forces were stored in a dozen glass vials, emitting a faint blue glow. Eden finally understood. This was the enemy's true weapon. Although he still didn't know what these vials were for, he had a premonition that if they were unleashed, something truly horrifying would happen. To prevent any accidents, Eden carefully marked the locations of these vile glass containers. Just as he finished marking them, his consciousness began to withdraw, and the feeling of omniscience vanished. Immediately after, his awareness snapped back into his body, hitting him like a hammer. Eden's consciousness returned to his physical form, his face pale, and he could barely stand. This was the result of overusing his power. He had completely drained the 50,000 units of hope. However, he was already accustomed to this feeling. Once the power of the small sun recovers further, perhaps this won't happen anymore. Eden steadied himself, walking into his office and collapsing onto the governor's throne. He was exhausted and desperately wanted to rest, but he couldn't. He had to quickly record the information he had just gathered. Taking a deep breath, he picked up his datapad and began carefully marking positions on the three-dimensional map of the residential areas. Before long, Eden called Bayev into the room. "Governor, we're ready. We can carry out your orders at any time." Bayev believed that the royal district had no other option. The governor would surely order a full-scale purge. But he was wrong. Eden handed the datapad to Bayev, giving his command. The map contains the exact locations of all the cultists. 15 of them are carrying terrifying chaos bio-weapons. You must not give them any chance to release those horrors. Bayev examined the data on the map. It was so detailed and precise, even tracking the cultists' movements. He glanced at Eden instinctively, realizing how terrifying this power was. This was something no ordinary mortal could achieve. "Do you have any questions?" Bayev quickly shook his head. "No, with this map, everything is clear." It didn't matter what kind of power the governor had used. Whether it was the power of the Holy Emperor, some mysterious sorcery, or a deal with chaos, it was not for Bayev, as a servant, to pry into. Unless his master willingly disclosed such secrets. His family's teachings had etched this iron rule into his instincts: never overstep. This was a lesson written in blood. The previous steward's family had been sent to the Underhive for such transgressions, and if any of their bloodline still lived, they would be scrounging for scraps in toxic waste dumps. The Cotton family, to which Bayev belonged, had endured for nearly 2,000 years, serving the Grant family without faltering because they knew how to learn from history. Eden was pleased with Bayev's sense of boundaries and continued explaining the key points of the map. He gave one final instruction. "The safety of the residential areas is in your hands. Minimize casualties as much as possible." "Yes, I will manage the situation and ensure the safety of the people," Bayev promised. The governor had already provided him with more than enough help. With such detailed information, if Bayev still couldn't resolve the issue, then his role as steward would be worthless. Despite the looming crisis, Bayev was more concerned about the governor's health. After all, for the royal district, the governor's noble bloodline was of paramount importance. He looked at Eden, worried. The governor seemed even more weakened than before. Was this the backlash of some power? "Governor, I believe you should rest. Leave the rest to me. I will handle everything," Bayev said firmly. The only thing he could do now was manage the situation and ease the governor's burdens. "All right, go and take care of it." Eden nodded, fully delegating the task to Bayev. From this point on, it was up to the steward to handle the matter. After all, Bayev had more experience in these matters. Eden firmly believed that professional matters should be handled by professionals. As governor, his role was simply to decide who would do the job. He pressed the summon bell on his desk, calling for the head maid, Linda. He could no longer hold out, he needed rest. When Linda arrived and saw the governor's pale face, she was immediately alarmed. "Governor, are you?" Eden interrupted her. "I'm going to rest now. If there's an emergency, you must wake me immediately." With that, the exhaustion he could no longer suppress overtook him, and he collapsed into Linda's arms, fast asleep. Linda was nearly frightened to death. But after confirming that the governor's vital signs were normal and that he was indeed just asleep, she breathed a sigh of relief. She summoned the maids to carry the governor to bed to rest. As Eden slept, Bayev hurriedly made his way to the war room in the Department of Military Affairs. It was going to be a long night. Chapter 43, Cleansing Operation. As night fell, Bayev had completed all the battle plans. This assault would be a joint operation involving the Imperial Guard, enforcers, and defense forces. Their objective was to carry out a precise sweep of the residential areas surrounding the Holy Square, ensuring the successful execution of the Emperor Ascension Festival. The targets of the cleansing operation were all clearly marked. The most important targets were the cultists carrying chaos bioweapons. The Imperial Guard would be responsible for executing them. The rest of the cultists would be handled by the defense forces, led by Eri. Meanwhile, the enforcers, commanded by Kays, were tasked with dealing with minor threats like murderers, street thugs, and those involved in heretical rituals. That's right, while Eden was using his psychic senses to locate the cultists of the Broken Eye cult, he also identified other potential threats and marked them. This filled Bayev with admiration and deep fear. What a terrifying and omniscient power. He was confident that after this operation, these residential areas would become some of the safest places in the upper hive, though, of course, only temporarily. Who knew what new horrors might emerge in the future? Once the tasks were assigned, Carter, Eri, and Kays each left the war room of the Department of Military Affairs. They would lead their respective teams, equipped with special gear, into the night's battle. The square in front of the Department of Military Affairs was brightly lit. 55 members of the Imperial Guard, 500 elite defense forces, and 1,000 enforcers had assembled. One eye, how's it going? Kays had finished organizing his troops and approached Eri. Eri handed the datapad to Kays. Here, these are the scumbags we need to take down. They're a bunch of bloodthirsty cultists. He grinned menacingly. You handle the strategy, but save the toughest ones for me. I can't wait to blow those bastards to pieces. Cultists were universally despised no matter where they were in the hive. They were dangerous and utterly vile. They liked to abduct women and children, torturing and mutilating their bodies. No one knew what kind of horrific rituals they conducted with the bodies, or what sort of demons they summoned. To Eri, cultists were the most disgusting creatures in existence, even more despicable than greenskin-grot pests. The best way to deal with cultists was to blow their heads off and then shove an incendiary grenade down their throats, sending them straight to hell. Not far away, the enforcer squad stood ready. The marshals wore thick body armor and helmets. They operated in teams of 6, armed with door breachers, automatic rifles, riot shields, and steel batons. Claude, the inspector, was nervously assigning tasks to his squad leaders. This was his first major operation since taking the position. It was said to be personally commanded by the governor, so he could not afford to make any mistakes. Otherwise, the vultures eyeing his position would certainly seize the opportunity to take his job. Don't let a single criminal from the list escape, or you and your worthless crew will be patrolling the streets for the rest of your lives. Claude shouted at his squad leaders. The squad leaders, in turn, repeated these words to their enforcer patrols. Under the pressure from their superiors, the patrol officers understood the gravity of this operation. They had to give it their all, there could be no mistakes. Failure could mean losing their jobs. While the other teams in the square were noisily exchanging orders and finalizing strategies, Carter and the 55 Imperial Guardsmen silently prepared their weapons. They were the most elite soldiers of the Royal District, and each of their targets had already been deeply imprinted in their minds. In this cleansing operation, they bore the heaviest responsibility, carrying the full weight of the governor's hopes. Regardless of whether the other squads succeeded, if they failed, everything would be ruined. As night deepened, all teams donned their night vision goggles. They boarded their respective vehicles and set off toward their designated targets. From above, the teams spread out across the residential areas, moving under the cover of darkness. Once the teams reached their positions, they waited quietly for the command to attack. In the war room of the Department of Military Affairs, Bayev watched the holographic map of the residential areas around the Holy Square, as red dots representing each team arrived at their designated locations. To avoid alerting the cultists and prompting them to release their terrifying chaos bio-weapons, no one was allowed to act on their own. They had to wait for the Imperial Guard to begin their assault before starting their own tasks. The Imperial Guard's plan was simple. Each group of 3 would reach their designated locations and simultaneously strike the targeted cultists. The operational guideline was clear: execute the cultists and prevent the release of the chaos bio-weapons. Bayev anxiously watched the red dots representing the Imperial Guard as they reached their targets. In 5 minutes, they would launch their attack. May the Holy Emperor protect us, he muttered as he glanced at the clock. The plans had been set, and the personnel were in position. All he could do now was wait. Drek Residential Complex. C-31 area, 13th floor. The area was a sprawling maze of crisscrossing corridors, and this single floor housed nearly 10,000 people. It was now late into the night, and the exhausted workers had all fallen into a deep sleep. The entire place was silent, not even a rat in sight. There simply wasn't enough food to support any other small creatures. Of course, there were occasional gunshots and screams. Some poor soul or family had likely met a tragic end. But no one dared to investigate or offer help. Recently, the security in the Drek residential complex had worsened, with robberies and murders becoming more frequent. Even the enforcers were reluctant to patrol the area. However, the corpse retrieval teams from the logistics department were always quick to arrive. If they were a moment too late, the valuable bodies would vanish without a trace. In short, no one dared to meddle in others' misfortunes in these times. Everyone locked their doors tightly and prayed for their own safety. In a rusted corner of the corridor, under the sickly green glow of a dim emergency light, the screams continued. They came from a young factory worker, being assaulted by a thug. She cried for help, but no one responded. All the doors around her were tightly locked. "Shut up, you filthy wench." The thug raised his fist and struck her, causing her head to bleed. Pain and fear nearly suffocated her, leaving her too terrified to resist. "Someone, please save me." Tears streamed down her face as she silently begged. She thought of the governor. Her co-workers had said that the great governor had been chosen and blessed by the Holy Emperor earlier that day. He would come to save them all. "Holy Emperor, Governor, anyone, please save me," the factory worker whimpered in despair. The thug sneered, landing another punch. "Another delusional idiot. Do you really think those high and mighty nobles care if you live or die? If you serve me well, maybe I'll spare your life. Understand, you worthless scum." Another punch came down, and the factory worker could no longer speak. The thug seemed to enjoy it, raising his fist once more. The factory worker no longer had the strength to shield herself. She closed her eyes in complete hopelessness. Thud! The expected punch didn't land, and she opened her eyes. She saw a dagger lodged in the thug's throat. Chapter 44, The Unspeakable Ritual. Ah! The thug's fist went limp. The dagger had pierced his windpipe with precision. He clutched his neck, gasping for air like a broken bellows, emitting a faint hissing sound. Soon, the thug collapsed. The factory worker saw the man standing behind the thug. He was dressed in a shabby work uniform but looked energetic. "Are you all right? Can you stand?" His voice was gentle as he extended his hand toward her. The factory worker grabbed his hand and managed to stand up. The pain made it difficult for her to keep her balance, and she almost leaned completely into his arms. "Thank you." She wiped away her tears. "My name is Mare, and I'm glad I found you in time, or it could have been dangerous." "Mare, I don't even know how to thank you." "Oh, I'm Arila." The factory worker, Arila, stammered, still in shock. "The beautiful Miss Arila, it was the least I could do." It was the first time Arila had ever been addressed like that. She had always felt invisible. Her co-workers constantly got her name wrong. And the factory overseer would always shout at her, "Hey! You! Useless!" Ever since her parents had worked themselves to death at the factory, no one had shown her any care. Perhaps one day she would die, and no one would even notice she was gone. But today, Arila once again felt the warmth of being cared for. She looked at Mare, seeing him as so gentlemanly, so kind. Especially those blue eyes, they seemed to exude trustworthiness. "Where's your home? I can take you back," he offered. "I really don't know how to thank you. I live in the C-43 area, room 502. Mare frowned slightly. "C-43 is quite a distance from here, and your injuries shouldn't be left untreated for long. I live nearby. Let me take you to my place to patch you up." Arila instinctively wanted to refuse, but looking into Mare's eyes, she found herself nodding without even thinking. "All right, thank you." Going to his place for some first aid sounded like a good idea. If she didn't treat her injuries soon and they worsened, it could affect her work tomorrow, which would be a disaster. She couldn't afford to lose her job, or she'd starve to death. "Hold on a bit longer, we'll be there soon." Mare supported Arila as they left the area and headed toward his place. Behind them, the thug lay on the ground, clutching his neck and struggling. He gasped in barely audible words. "Help me, someone, please save me." But no one could hear his cries for help. His breath grew more labored as he realized he was close to death. Fear and regret washed over him. Holy Emperor, Governor, someone, please save me. He watched Mare and Arila walk away before his body went limp, and he lost all signs of life. He was dead. Arila followed Mare through the winding corridors of the complex, until they finally reached the entrance of a communal dormitory. For some reason, she smelled a foul stench and felt a sense of unease. It stinks. Mare covered his nose in disgust. Those filthy people never wash themselves, they stink like corpses. He looked at Arila apologetically. Bear with it. Once I've bandaged you up, I'll take you home right away. Okay. Arila agreed and followed him inside. As soon as she stepped through the door, a strange fragrance filled the air, and she heard the door lock click shut behind her. The room ahead was pitch black, and she couldn't see a thing. For some reason, a strong sense of unease crept over her, making her hair stand on end. In the darkness, Mare's voice cut through the tension, calming her. Don't be afraid. All my roommates are on night shifts. It's just the two of us here. Arila's heart settled down again. Mare had saved her. She believed this gentleman wouldn't harm her. Wait here for a moment, I'll get a lamp, Mare said, letting go of her hand and disappearing into the darkness. There hadn't been any electricity in this complex for ages, and the only light came from the faint glow of the emergency strips in the building's corridors. So there was no chance of having electricity, let alone a lamp, inside this place. Light was a luxury only available in the royal district or the residences of government officials. Even a lamp was considered a rare luxury. Just as Arila began to wonder how Mare could afford such a precious item, he returned with the lamp. Mare's shadow approached, and he kindly reminded her. Close your eyes first, and then slowly open them so the light won't hurt your eyes. Hearing this, Arila quickly closed her eyes. Mr. Mare, I've closed my eyes. Mare gently turned the lamp switch, and with a crisp click, a warm yellow light flooded the room. You can open your eyes now. Mare's voice held an excitement he could barely contain. Arila slowly opened her eyes. In the yellow light, she saw Mare standing in the middle of the room, watching her. And behind him, the unspeakable horror of the ritual. The entire room was drenched in blood. Women's flayed corpses were nailed to the walls, their flesh mangled and arranged in grotesque poses. Some of the women were still alive, writhing like worms, but their vocal cords had been severed, leaving them to scream silently. Around Mare, extending outwards, was a blood-painted inverted pentagram, its twisted symbols enough to chill the soul. At various key points of the ritual lay piles of infant corpses, women's heads, and heaps of entrails. It was hell on earth. Arila's terror peaked. She wanted to scream for help but couldn't produce any sound, only managing to cover her mouth in horror. She didn't even have the strength to turn and run. What a beautiful masterpiece. Can't you appreciate their beauty? Mare spread his arms wide, presenting his most perfect creation to Arila. The pentagram pulsed with a ghostly blue light, its glow flickering like a living thing's breath. Mare walked over to her, gently taking her hand and leading her toward the pentagram. This is my gift to the all-knowing Lord of Eyes. He will love it. Mr. Mare, please, let me go. Arila stammered in fear, barely able to speak. She looked into Mare's blue eyes, her face filled with desperation and helplessness. At that moment, she was like a lamb awaiting slaughter. Mare stroked her face, tucking her hair behind her ear. You can't leave. You are the best gift I could offer to the Lord of Eyes. As his hand moved over her face, Arila felt her body stiffen, paralyzed. She looked at the writhing women on the walls, seeing her fate reflected in them. Fear consumed her, and her tears flowed like an unstoppable flood. No. Please, no. My poor little lamb, don't be afraid. Just sit down and rest. Mare gently wiped Arila's tears with a silk handkerchief, his eyes filled with concern and reassurance. He led her to a broken bed by the wall and helped her sit down. You are different from those other women. How could I bear to kill you? No, instead, I will grant you the most exalted power from the Lord of Eyes. Mare quickly crossed the room to a wooden box in the corner, carefully retrieving an object covered in a black cloth. With a swift motion, he tore the cloth away, and a brilliant blue light spilled out, dazzling and mesmerizing. Chapter 45, Execution by the Governor's Hand. What an enchanting color. Mare gazed at the dazzling blue liquid inside the vial. The liquid's hue shifted subtly, as if it pulsed with life. He resisted the urge to experience its power firsthand and tore his gaze away. For now, he couldn't return to the embrace of the all-seeing Lord. He had to remain alive to make even greater sacrifices for him. Mare pulled out a sharp dagger, turning to Aurila. You should feel honored to be able to bear the power of the all-seeing Lord. Your wretched life will be elevated. Seeing the blade in Mare's hand, Aurila's pupils dilated in fear. Holy Emperor, what are you going to do to me? Don't be afraid. It's simple. I'm going to cut open your stomach and place this vial of great power inside. On the day of the Emperor Ascension Festival, you will appear among the celebrating crowds. In front of that false emperor's statue, your womb will give birth to the offspring of the all-seeing Lord. Mare rambled on, but Aurila couldn't fully comprehend. All she understood was that this terrifying cultist was going to cut open her belly. Holy Emperor, am I going to die here? Aurila closed her eyes in despair, without even the desire to pray. Her heart had already died. Now she truly understood, no one cared whether a lowly worker like her lived or died. Not the Holy Emperor, nor the governor. Their gaze would never linger on someone as insignificant as her. They didn't care. Seeing Aurila close her eyes without struggling, Mare lost the desire to speak further. Forget it. These pitiful mortals can never comprehend true greatness. He approached her, ready to slice open her stomach and insert the vial of chaos essence. But just as he took a step, he hesitated. Was that footsteps? In that moment of hesitation, boom. The metal door was struck from the outside, smashing inward and embedding itself into the wall. Carter and 2 other Imperial guards burst in, heading straight for Mare. Mare reacted swiftly, even feeling a hint of exhilaration. Finally, I can experience this great power myself. Mare's right hand swelled as he grabbed the vial of chaos essence, plunging it toward his chest. Thank you, all-seeing Lord, for this generous gift. My life will be elevated. He roared. Damn dogs. But then, Mare froze as blood sprayed across his face. Where's my hand? His first thought was that he could no longer feel his hand, and then the excruciating pain hit him. Just a moment ago, his arm holding the vial had been torn off. Mare looked up at the 2-meter-tall Imperial Guard captain, Carter, who was holding his severed arm. For the first time, Mare realized the terrifying power of the Imperial Guard. Catch! Carter ripped the vial from the severed arm and tossed it backward. Another guard behind him raised his hand and caught the vial of chaos essence, placing it into a specially designed containment unit on his belt, sealing it shut. Once locked inside the containment unit, nothing short of a bomb could break it open without the proper code. Now, all that was left was to deal with the cultist in front of them. Protect the lady. Carter issued another command. According to the governor's orders, they had to ensure the success of the mission while protecting every citizen. As soon as Carter spoke, the guard who had secured the vial turned and walked toward Aurila, positioning his large frame between her and the danger. Seeing the Imperial guards before her, Aurila was overwhelmed with relief. She recognized the armored giants standing in front of her. They were the governor's war angels. Not yet there. Holy Emperor, the governor really sent people to save me. The thought brought tears of joy to Aurila's eyes, mixed with a twinge of regret. She shouldn't have thought so poorly of the governor in the past. Mare's agonizing scream echoed. While Aurila was lost in her emotions, Carter grabbed Mare and threw him onto the spiked hooks hanging from the wall. The very hooks Mare had used to torture those unfortunate women, now he was hung upon them himself. Heresy is forbidden in the royal district. By the order of the governor, you are hereby sentenced to death. Rat-a-tat-tat. Carter and another Imperial guard raised their bolt guns and unleashed a barrage of fire, tearing Mare apart until he was nothing more than a ragged corpse. Only his mangled neck connected to half of his head. Ha 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 ha. Mare's head suddenly jerked up, his gaze filled with contempt. You can't kill me. The ritual is complete. As soon as he spoke, the ritual circle in the room flared with eerie blue light. The circle seemed to come alive, absorbing all the blood and flesh offered as sacrifices. The collected matter flowed into Mare's body. His shattered life force grew stronger, his body rapidly healing and swelling into a terrifying 2-meter-tall monstrosity. He howled, his hateful gaze fixed on everyone. The all-seeing Lord has cast his gaze upon me and granted me power. Such incredible power. You worthless insects, are you ready to die? Through a gap, Aurila saw the horrifying monster that Mare had become. Fear gripped her once again. She wanted to run but felt a wave of security as she saw the large Imperial guards standing protectively before her. The guards should be able to handle this monster, right? Doubt flickered in Aurila's mind, but she chose to believe. The governor's angels wouldn't abandon her. Mare stood tall, feeling invincible with the power gifted by the all-seeing Lord. He tore the hook from his back and casually grabbed 2 mangled corpses, stuffing them into his mouth to chew on. Yet he still felt hunger. Thud, thud, thud. He dragged his blood-soaked body forward, his crimson eyes locked onto Carter and the others. Wretched insects, I will tear your flesh apart piece by piece and devour it. Have you said enough? Carter's calm, steady voice cut through. Mare was taken aback. You worthless ins. Carter abruptly raised his hand, gripping Mare's jaw tightly and forcing him to kneel on the ground. Mare tried to resist, but Carter's strength was overwhelming, he couldn't break free. Then, with a surge of force, Carter rammed his fist into Mare's mouth, driving it deep into his stomach. Carter swiftly withdrew his hand. Mare's face twisted in agony as he glared at Carter with hatred, but then he froze. He noticed the grenade pin in Carter's hand. Something's inside my stomach. Just moments ago, Carter had shoved several stun grenades into the cultist's stomach. Shields. Carter casually tossed aside the grenade pins and issued his order. 2 Imperial guards quickly deployed their shields, one covering Carter and the other shielding Arila, blocking all possible angles. Damn it. Mare desperately clawed at his stomach, but it was too late. Click. Boom. The grenades inside Mare's stomach exploded, blowing him apart into chunks of flesh, spraying blood in every direction. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 46, Chaos Bio-Weapon Leaked. Flesh fragments splattered everywhere, covering the entire room. Once the blood mist from the explosion settled, the Imperial guards lowered their shields. All eyes turned to the spot where Mare had stood. The 2-meter-tall flesh monstrosity was now gone. Mare's corrupted body had been obliterated by the blast of the stun grenades, leaving only a head on the ground. Even though only his head remained, he was still alive, clinging to a sliver of life. But now, the arrogance that had once filled Mare was gone. Instead, he cursed. You damn dogs of the false emperor. I curse you. The all-seeing Lord will punish you. No, don't come near me. Stay away. As Carter approached, fear appeared in Mare's eyes. Having faced the terror of death, he suddenly found a desire to survive. Life was precious, and now Mare didn't want to die. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at Carter, pleading. Please. No, don't. But it was too late for regrets now. Squish. Carter's heavy boot came down, crushing Mare's head like a balloon. One of the Imperial guards glanced around the blood-soaked room and couldn't help but comment. The captain's as brutal as ever. He deserved it, Carter said firmly, though his voice held a note of restraint. He gazed at the ritual circle, the mangled bodies of infants, and the twisted corpses of women. Rage simmered in his eyes. No punishment was too severe for these heretical cultists. As one of the governor's war angels, it was his duty to make these heretics know the true meaning of terror and the wrath of thunder. Carter instructed Arila to leave the horrific scene. Afterward, he and the 2 other Imperial guards searched the room, but they found nothing else of concern. Commence cleanup, Carter ordered, taking one last look at the faintly twitching bodies on the walls before turning to leave. Those women could no longer be saved, and the least they could do was end their suffering quickly. 2 of the guards positioned themselves at the door and retrieved small flamethrowers, pulling down their masks. They aimed the flames at the ritual circle and the corrupted corpses, burning everything to ash. Though the bodies writhed and silently screamed in agony, a look of peace appeared on their faces. They were finally free. A wave of heat rushed out of the room, startling Arila. Seeing this, Carter stepped slightly in front of her to shield her from the blast. He pulled out a spray from his waste storage unit and applied it to Arila, while calmly explaining. This is a healing agent. It'll treat your wounds. Arila felt her nerves settle as the pain in her wounds quickly subsided. Such miraculous effects. Carter looked at Arila and said, Miss Imperial Guard, my name is Arila. She replied. Miss Arila, stay here for a few minutes. The enforcers will come and escort you home. Yes, sir. Arila nodded like an obedient lamb. Carter, recalling something, added, tonight is dangerous. Once you're home, don't go outside. With that, Carter turned to leave. While he had dealt with this cultist hideout, the other Imperial guards, along with the defense forces and enforcers, had begun their own assault operations. With his sharp hearing, Carter could make out the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions. Once he finished here, he would go and provide support. Imperial Guard. Arila suddenly called out to Carter. In the past, she would never have dared to do something like that. She wouldn't have even had the courage to stop an enforcer, let alone an Imperial Guard. She had always been too afraid of being beaten or even killed if she angered them. But today, for some reason, she had called out to the Imperial Guard. Was she insane? After calling out, Arila was shocked by her own actions and filled with fear. Would the Imperial Guard punish her for this? Carter turned back, a bit surprised, and looked at Arila. Miss, is something wrong? Gathering her courage, Arila solemnly thanked him. Imperial Guard, thank you for saving me. She clasped her hands tightly together and nervously added. And please thank the governor for me. I never thought he would hear my prayers and send you, the war angels, to save me. Please tell him how grateful I am. I will never forget his kindness. Poor Arila truly believed that the governor had heard her prayers and sent the Imperial Guards, whom the people called war angels, to rescue her. At this moment, her heart was filled with deep respect and gratitude for the governor, and she was ready to give her all for him. Hearing Arila's words, Carter paused and thought. If any other officials from the royal district had been here to hear such a statement, they would have cruelly mocked the foolishness of this woman. Then, in the name of disrespecting the governor, they would have punished her harshly until she closed her mouth and never spoke such idiotic, presumptuous words again. But Carter would never do that. As the governor's most loyal bodyguard and servant, Carter knew that the governor disliked such behavior. The governor had changed, he cared for the people more than his father ever had. This was rare among the governors of the Imperium. For that reason, Carter had to follow the governor's example, to avoid being cast out. Besides, Carter had never taken pleasure in bullying the weak. Seeing Carter remain silent, Arila began to panic, realizing what she had just said. What was I thinking? She was terrified. Had she lost her mind, daring to ask something so bold of the Imperial Guards? I am, Imperial Guard, she stammered in fear. Miss Arila, there's no need to be afraid. Carter, concerned that she was frightened, awkwardly forced a smile on his normally stern face. If I get the chance, I will pass along your thanks to the governor. The Imperial Guard had actually agreed to such an impolite request. Hearing Carter's response, overwhelming joy filled Arila's heart. She was so moved that she nearly collapsed with gratitude. Thank you, Imperial Guard. At that moment, the enforcers, assigned to follow up, arrived and saluted Carter. Captain Carter, take this lady home. Yes, sir. The enforcers approached and quietly communicated with Arila, and seeing this, Carter no longer paid attention. His task was complete. The cleanup inside the house had also been finished. The two Imperial Guards retracted their flamethrowers and stood at attention beside Carter. Captain, the house is clean. No signs of life detected. Good. Let's move. Carter led his two guards outside. Suddenly, Carter's communicator buzzed. It was an emergency signal. He quickly answered the call. This is Squad A1, Captain Carter, go ahead. Listening to the report on the other end, Carter's expression quickly darkened. Understood. We'll head to the combat zone immediately. Captain, what's going on? There's been a chaos bio-weapon leak over in Squad C2's area. It's a big one. Chapter 47, The Chaos Abomination. Time was running out. Carter called for the assault ship through his communicator. The assault ship arrived quickly, hovering over the 13th level courtyard of the Drake district. The hatch slowly opened. Let's go. We need to move quickly. Without hesitation, Carter and his Imperial Guards leapt into the ship. As soon as the hatch closed, the ship ascended rapidly, speeding towards the battle zone. In the operations command room, Bayev's expression was tense as he stared at the red markers on the slum district map. One of the markers indicated a terrifying chaos abomination. During the C2 squad's mission in the area, a mistake had occurred. A cultist had seized the opportunity to inject the chaos essence into himself. The powerful forces of chaos instantly corrupted the cultist, transforming him into a chaos abomination. This abomination was wreaking havoc, causing massive casualties among both the Imperial Guards and the surrounding civilians. Bayev had already dispatched all available reinforcements to the area. The strongest of the Imperial Guards, Captain Carter, was en route to the battlefield as well. If the abomination hadn't emerged in a civilian zone, he would have called in artillery strikes to level the area. But unless it was absolutely necessary, he couldn't do that. Such actions would provoke the governor's wrath, something Bayev could not afford. Moreover, he had promised the governor that he would protect the people. If too many died tonight, he wouldn't be able to face the governor. For now, the situation was still under control. He could only hope that there would be no more mistakes from those executing the mission. Emperor above, please protect me, protect those soldiers, and let them complete their task safely. In the southern part of the slum district, support troops from the defense force and enforcers were gathering, evacuating all civilians from the combat zone. On the ground in the distance, a multi-meter-tall chaos abomination was rampaging. Its body was a grotesque mass of twisted flesh. The flesh contorted and writhed, lacking any clear shape or form, making it revolting to behold. Thick tentacles extended from the writhing flesh, moving like twisted serpents, constantly probing their surroundings. The surface of the tentacles was covered in suckers and densely packed with black eyeballs, which darted about, scanning the area. The sight of these eyeballs emitted a palpable sense of malice, sending chills down the spines of anyone nearby. If a cultist were to witness this scene, they would undoubtedly fall to their knees, praising the all-seeing Lord. The offspring of the great all-seeing Lord has descended. The abomination's tentacles whipped about, smashing through the flimsy shelters in its path. It then used its tentacles to scoop up the people hiding within, tossing them into its gaping maw as if discarding trash. The flames of destruction roared, and the terrified screams of civilians echoed through the area, mixed with sobs and wails. The atmosphere of fear weighed heavily on everyone. All they wanted was to flee, to escape as far as possible from the monstrous abomination. But those who were too close were utterly paralyzed by the fear radiating from the abomination. They couldn't even muster the courage to run. They could only be devoured alive. Rat-a-tat-tat. The defense force soldiers and enforcers surrounding the abomination unleashed a hail of gunfire at the monstrous entity. Their guns spat flames, and bullets rained down on the abomination like a torrential storm. But their attacks seemed to have no effect. Bullets were absorbed into the abomination's flesh, as if consumed, causing no visible harm. The abomination continued its advance towards the crowd. One of its tentacles wrapped around a screaming worker and constricted with brutal force. Like crushing a mere insect, the worker was suffocated, his body crushed into a bloody mess. Then, it tossed the mangled corpse into its mouth, chewing with sickening crunches. Ah, such delicious flesh. The cultist's head, embedded in the abomination's chest, cackled with glee. It radiated a savage hunger for more blood and meat. It looked hungrily at the fleeing crowd. You can't escape. You will all become my food. A tentacle lashed out, sending a charging Imperial guard flying, crashing into a distant shack. Another tentacle whipped forward, capturing several unlucky civilians. It hoisted them into the air and casually tossed them into its mouth, where sickening crunching noises followed, filling the air with horror. Boom! The abomination was struck by a shell, and the force of the explosion sent its massive body toppling backward, crashing heavily to the ground. Its fall caused further destruction, flattening a row of tin shelters into debris. The shell had been fired by the assault ship. Carter's assault ship had arrived, hovering not far from the abomination. The hatch opened, and Carter, along with his Imperial guards, leapt out, landing heavily on the ground with dust swirling around them. Carter and his massive guards emerged from the smoke, standing in the abomination's path. The ship's cargo bay then opened, dropping a large, thick iron crate, almost as tall as a man. The crate slammed into the ground with a thud, embedding itself not far from Carter. Carter quickly approached the crate, pressing a switch on its side. The crate opened, revealing its contents. It was a nearly 2-meter-long blood-red chainsword. The chainsword was named the Eviscerator, and its exaggerated size made it clear that no ordinary human could wield it. This weapon had once been the prized possession of Bishop Donnie, said to have belonged to a powerful and fanatical space marine. After Governor Eden obtained the chainsword from Bishop Donnie, he gifted it to Carter. The Eviscerator not only had immense destructive power but had also been consecrated and blessed by the Church, making it the bane of heretics and cultists. Carter reverently grasped the hilt with both hands and drew the massive weapon. Though the sword was still somewhat difficult for him to wield with ease, it was enough for battle. At that moment, the last surviving member of C2 Squad crawled out of the wrecked shack and ran over. His arm was severed, and his body was covered in wounds. The Imperial Guard looked at Carter, his eyes filled with guilt. "Captain, it's all my fault. Had it not been for his mistake, his comrades wouldn't have died." "Shut up." Carter's expression was cold as he forcefully twisted the chainsword's valve, injecting promethium fuel into the engine. Instantly, the chainsword's engine roared to life, causing the jagged blades to spin at high speed, throwing off sparks like a wild, roaring beast. Carter fixed his gaze on the abomination, now rising again in the distance, a grotesque mass of squirming flesh. Coldly, he declared, "As the strongest warriors of the royal district, the war angels of the governor, we prove our loyalty through fearless battle. Prepare for combat. We'll take that heretic's head to prove our devotion." Chapter 48, Battle. As Carter's battle cry resonated through the air, a surge of unparalleled courage and determination radiated from him. It was the bravery and fearlessness of the Imperial Guards. The Guards, inspired by Carter's declaration, felt their fighting spirits ignite. Even the severely injured guard joined the formation. He could still fight. Even if he were to die, he would die on the battlefield. For only then could he wash away the shame of his earlier failure. He would prove his loyalty to the governor through the blood of the heretical cultists. Bolters were loaded, and the engines of chainswords roared. With Carter leading, wielding the massive eviscerator chainsword, the guards formed a tight battle formation and steadily advanced towards the abomination. In their hearts, only battle and death could guide them. The surrounding gunfire had stopped. After realizing that conventional weapons had no effect, the defense force and enforcers ceased their attacks to avoid interfering with the Imperial Guards. For a moment, there was an eerie silence. All eyes were fixed on the backs of the brave guards. They were the war angels from the royal district, loyal to the governor. Everyone's hopes rested on their shoulders. Some of the enforcers and defense force soldiers began to pray. They prayed for the emperor's protection and for him to bless the Imperial Guards with invincible strength. They hoped the guards would become as heroic as the legendary champions of the emperor. Roar! The abomination crawled out of the rubble. The shell that had struck it earlier hadn't caused much damage. But now, it was enraged. How dare these weak insects resist? How dare they defy the offspring of the all-seeing Lord? Its grotesque, twisted flesh swelled and surged. The writhing tentacles retracted, gathering in front of it, as thousands of black eyes on the tendrils fixated on the approaching guards. This was the gaze of chaos, radiating intense malice, as if it wished to consume all life. The offspring of the great all-seeing Lord will not forgive any disrespect. You should be afraid. The cultist's head embedded in the abomination's chest screamed, delirious with excitement. Though he had long since lost control of his body. The moment he injected the chaos essence, his bloodthirsty primal instincts had taken over. He was merely a parasite in this grotesque body. The relationship between the cultist and the abomination was like that of a parasite and its host, or a dog and its master. Of course, the cultist didn't see it that way. He believed that the power of this body belonged to him, a divine gift from the all-seeing Lord. The tentacles of the abomination, brimming with hostility, locked onto Carter. Its primal instincts told it that the tall warrior posed the greatest threat. Whip! A tentacle lashed out, whistling through the air toward Carter. But before Carter could react, his fellow guards moved swiftly, intercepting the strike and severing the tentacle. More tentacles followed, but none achieved any success. Every strike was blocked by the guards. Carter continued his steady advance, his steps unwavering, flanked by his comrades. Step by step, they closed the distance. Finally, Carter and his guards stood before the abomination, gazing up at the towering monstrosity. For a moment, neither side moved, the tension so thick it seemed to freeze the air. Imperial lapdogs. The cultist's head suddenly broke the silence with its shrieking. You should be afraid. Kneel before the great all-seeing Lord. Kneel and beg for mercy. Offer your flesh in sacrifice, and perhaps. Boom. The cultist's words were cut off by an explosion. Carter had raised his bolt pistol and fired a shot right into the cultist's head, blasting half of it apart like a shattered melon. Damn you, kill them. Kill them all. With a scream of fury, the cultist, now with half a head, commanded the abomination. The abomination lashed out with its two thickest tentacles, hurtling them down towards Carter with crushing force. But Carter remained composed, sidestepping the tentacles' direct strike. The tentacles slammed into the ground with a thunderous crash, sending dust flying everywhere. In the midst of the dust, the roar of the chainsword grew even louder. Carter swung the eviscerator, instantly severing the tentacles, spraying blood everywhere. The severed tentacles thrashed violently on the ground. At that moment, the other guards launched their attacks. Working in unison, they either shot at or slashed the remaining tentacles. The sound of exploding bolts and the roar of chainswords filled the air. In no time, under the coordinated assault of the Imperial guards, every one of the abomination's tentacles had been severed. With the path clear, Carter charged forward, swinging the eviscerator at the abomination's main body. Each swing tore away chunks of the abomination's flesh, the spinning teeth of the chainsword shredding its grotesque form. The abomination's massive, misshapen body was taking severe damage. Gashes and wounds covered its flesh, and bits of meat fell to the ground with every strike. Pain. Damn Imperial scum. Hurry, move, fight back. The cultist's head shared in the abomination's pain, unable to bear the torment. He screamed and ordered the abomination to fight, but the creature was beyond his control. Seeing this, Carter and the guards intensified their assault. They were determined to destroy this heretical abomination. Roar, roar. Sensing the mounting threat, the abomination underwent another mutation. All of its black eyes turned blood red, filling with veins. Suddenly, the abomination's flesh began to swell, inflating rapidly. It looked like a balloon on the verge of bursting. Carter sensed the danger and shouted, "Get back!" But his warning came too late. Boom! The outer layer of the abomination exploded like a bomb. The powerful shockwave sent the Imperial guards flying in all directions, slamming them into the surroundings. Carter, being closest to the blast, took the brunt of the impact. He was thrown violently to the ground. When Carter managed to stand up again, he saw through the smoke and dust that something was emerging. A humanoid chaos abomination, over 3 meters tall. The humanoid abomination had bulging muscles, blood vessels protruding from its skin, and countless blood-red eyes scattered across its body. Those eyes turned and swiveled aimlessly, emitting an eerie aura. It radiated an even more terrifying presence than before, striking fear into the hearts of the Imperial guards. As for the regular soldiers further away, they were utterly paralyzed by terror. Boom! The humanoid abomination leapt from a distance, landing directly in front of Carter. Chapter 49, Rare Power Weapon. Carter raised his head, gazing at the towering humanoid abomination before him, and took a deep breath. Ha ha ha, feeling scared, little man. The half-head of the cultist embedded in the chest of the abomination looked down at Carter, his tone becoming even more arrogant. He felt triumphant once again. When the outer layer of flesh exploded, the cultist had gained control over the body. Now wielding the abominable form, the cultist stretched his limbs as the crimson muscles rippled with terrifying power. The raw strength was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. From his lofty position, the cultist sneered at Carter and began spewing taunts. "Die, you lapdogs of the false emperor. I'll twist off your heads one by one and paint your blood all over that worthless statue. Do you know how many I've killed? Over 200. And half of them were pregnant women and children. Their bodies made the perfect sacrifices." The cultist cackled maniacally, but the only response was the roar of Carter's chainsword. Carter swung the eviscerator toward the abomination, but the creature dodged and retreated to a safer distance. The cultist laughed harder, sensing Carter's growing fury. "Yes, that's the face. You're angry, aren't you? But there's nothing you can do to me." The abomination picked up a jagged piece of metal and hurled it toward the defense force's position. A sharp sound cut through the air, followed by screams of agony from afar. Several defense force soldiers were sliced in half, collapsing to the ground, wailing in pain. The cultist reveled in the sight and mockingly cupped his ear as if listening. "Do you hear that? Such beautiful cries. Look at them, spilling their guts. How tragic. Heretic, die." Just then, an injured Imperial Guard soldier rose and charged at the abomination, but his attack was effortlessly deflected, sending him flying. The cultist, controlling the abomination, returned to Carter, glaring coldly at him. "Watch closely. I'll kill even more people right before your eyes. You can't save them. You can't save anyone." Bang, bang, bang. Before the cultist could continue, explosive bolts struck the abomination's back, causing the massive creature to stagger. One of the guards had fired a burst of explosive rounds from behind. "You damn." The cultist's words were cut short when he saw a massive fist heading straight for his face. He hadn't expected such an attack and was caught off guard, panic crossing his features. It was Carter's fist. Seizing the moment of distraction, Carter had charged, putting all his strength into a punch aimed at the cultist's grotesque face, determined to smash it to pieces. Thud! But before the punch could land, the abomination's massive hand caught Carter's fist midair. No matter how hard Carter tried, straining with all his might, the abomination slowly pried his fist away. The cultist sneered, surprised. Did you really think you could hit me? I was just toying with you earlier. I've ascended to a higher state of being. I am the child of the great all-seeing Lord. You, on the other hand, are still a pitiful, mortal insect. How laughable, to think you could harm me. With that, the abomination's grip tightened around Carter's fist, gathering strength. Feel the fear, submit. You will experience the overwhelming power. The abomination's fist slammed into Carter's chest with a deafening boom. The impact caused sparks to fly from Carter's chestplate, denting the armor. His chainsword flew out of his grasp, and his body was sent hurtling backward, smashing through several shanties before coming to a stop. Cough. Carter struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his mouth. But before he could catch his breath, a sharp object came hurtling toward him. With a desperate lunge, Carter rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding his own chainsword, which had been thrown back at him by the abomination. The sword embedded itself in the ground where Carter had been moments earlier, raising a cloud of dust. Had Carter been a moment slower, he would have been crushed by his own weapon. As a counterattack, Carter pulled out his bolt pistol and fired a volley at the abomination. The explosive round struck the cultist's head embedded in the abomination's chest. You're really starting to annoy me, little man. The cultist-controlled abomination began advancing toward Carter, step by heavy step. He was growing tired of the fight. It was time to kill this stubborn guard and feast upon the helpless citizens behind him. No one can stop me. I'll tear you apart, and begging for mercy won't save you. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, 3 assault ships swooped in, raining fire down on the abomination. Explosions rocked the creature's body, forcing it to halt its advance. They were the Imperial Guard's assault ships. More guards jumped from the ships, surrounding the abomination. The assault ships provided covering fire, but one of the abomination's thrown metal sheets struck the engine of one of the ships, causing it to crash nearby. The remaining ships quickly ascended out of range. Though the ships retreated, the guards took over, their weapons unleashing a barrage on the abomination. The battlefield echoed with the sounds of explosions and light artillery fire. Reinforcements had arrived. Carter sighed with relief. He had managed to hold out long enough, and now, the real fight could begin. He picked up the eviscerator chainsword from the ground. Now, the true attack would commence. And his secret weapon lay in his hands, the chainsword. This was no ordinary chainsword, but a rare power weapon from the mighty Adeptus Astartes. A treasure every warrior coveted, a weapon they would die to possess. Power weapons, especially of this caliber, were incredibly rare, often with centuries or even millennia of history behind them. Only the strongest and most influential in the Imperium were granted the honor of wielding such weapons, such as the Space Marines, Inquisitors, and high-ranking commanders. And now, in his hands, Carter held such a weapon, gifted to him by the governor, a relic of a powerful Space Marine. What a blessing, what an honor. Of course, such weapons were not easily wielded by mere mortals. It required the gene-enhanced strength and rigorous training of the Adeptus Astartes to wield without harm. Carter had only undergone light gene modification and wasn't fully capable of using it yet. But he had something else, boundless courage. Carter decided to unleash the full power of the weapon and end the life of this heretical monstrosity. Chapter 50, Terrifying Destructive Power. Carter gripped the handle of the chainsword with both hands and plunged it into the ground. He closed his eyes, pouring his entire heart into a prayer. Oh, God Emperor, grant me strength so that I may face this battle without fear. I will fight with all my might until the end. In the name of judgment, I will wield this sword and purge the heretical abominations. Carter's eyes shot open, filled with determination. He twisted the hilt of the chainsword, activating the power field valve. Bzzz. In an instant, the chainsword lit up, its blade covered with a glowing blue energy field. Small bolts of electricity crackled along the blade's teeth, growing larger as the energy surged, extending up Carter's armored arms. The crackling energy ate into Carter's gauntlets, blackening them as searing pain coursed through his arms. Arg! From a distance, the cultist's head embedded in the chest of the abomination also noticed what was happening. The residual energy waves emanating from the weapon filled him with instinctual dread, and a wave of terror washed over him. He was scared. That weapon held power enough to kill him. Damn it! How is he controlling such a terrifying energy? The cultist couldn't allow Carter to raise that weapon. If he did, it would be the end. The cultist-controlled abomination rushed toward Carter, but quickly got tangled in steel cables. These cables had been fired by the Imperial Guard, those pesky soldiers were holding him back. The guards launched specialized harpoons, each one equipped with barbs that buried themselves deep into the abomination's flesh. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Several harpoons struck the abomination, and the barbs locked firmly into its flesh, making them nearly impossible to remove. Get off me. I order you to let go. You worthless bugs. The cultist ignored the pain and desperately tried to drive the abomination toward Carter. But he was held fast. Each of the barbed harpoons was tethered to steel cables, the other ends gripped tightly by the Imperial guards. They coordinated, wrapping the cables around the abomination's limbs and body, pulling with all their strength to restrain the monstrous creature. This was a tactic they had prepared specifically to deal with high-threat enemies, restrict their movement, then destroy them with overwhelming force. The cultist began to panic, furiously struggling to break free. His time was running out. But he remained trapped. Hold the line, brothers. We can't let this heretical scum interrupt the captain. One of the guards shouted. The fight reached a deadlock. But the balance would soon be broken. The abomination's strength far surpassed the Imperial guards. They were growing tired and couldn't hold him much longer. Fortunately, Carter was ready. Despite the agony caused by the energy field's corrosive power, Carter raised the crackling chainsword high above his head. He twisted the engine valve, and as the chainsword roared to life, the electric currents intensified, coursing even more violently across his armor. This was the weapon's true power. At that moment, all eyes were on Carter. The electricity running through his armor made him stand out like a beacon amidst the fire-lit shantytown. It was almost as if he had taken on a holy aura. The defense force and enforcers began praying, offering praise to their mightiest warrior. The terrified citizens, witnessing this sight, knelt one after the other. Oh, God Emperor! The rumors were true, the governor really has been blessed by His Majesty. He has sent us his holy angel of war. The citizens prayed that this angel of war from the capital would drive away the demonic abomination and save them from their suffering. Carter, however, was unaware of all of this. His focus was entirely on the abomination ahead. Gripping the chainsword tightly, Carter charged toward the abomination. As he ran, the thrusters on the back of his armor roared to life, blue flames bursting out to propel him forward. He moved faster and faster. At that moment, Carter had only one thought. He wasn't powerless. He would cut off this heretic's head with his chainsword and prove his strength and loyalty to the governor. The cultist saw Carter rushing toward him. More than that, he saw the terrifying blue-charged chainsword Carter was wielding. He couldn't let that sword touch him. Desperately, the cultist forced the abomination to tear out the barbed harpoons and break free from the guards. Finally, he was free. The cultist rejoiced, thinking he could now escape. With his speed, that guy would never catch him. You're all dead meat. The cultist snarled, turning to flee. But the roar of the chainsword filled the air, and a shadow fell over him. The cultist and the abomination looked up to see Carter, leaping high into the air, chainsword raised high and crackling with energy. Terror flooded the cultist's face. It was over. Bees. With a deafening roar, the chainsword sliced into the abomination's body. The saw teeth tore through the flesh, while the energy field unleashed destructive power, ripping apart the abomination's internal tissues beyond any hope of regeneration. The chainsword carved through the abomination's body at a diagonal angle from the shoulder, slicing it in half. Thud. The abomination, unable to move, collapsed to the ground in two pieces with a heavy crash. Ah! The cultist embedded in the abomination's chest screamed in agony, his eyes wide with panic as he desperately tried to regain control of the body and flee. Damn it! Move, damn you! Move! But nothing happened. The abomination's body was dead, the energy field had utterly destroyed its flesh. Phew! With the abomination defeated, the roar of the chainsword ceased. Carter's armor was blackened and smoking from the residual energy. He planted the chainsword in the ground to steady himself, barely able to stand from exhaustion. That was close. He had nearly failed. Carter let the chainsword fall and approached the abomination's lifeless body. Move, move. By the all-seeing Lord, help your loyal follower. I sacrificed so many delicious pregnant women and babies for you. The cultist's head was babbling, still desperately trying to reanimate the body. But once again, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see Carter towering over him. You filthy insect, ah! Before he could finish, a large hand clamped tightly around his neck. Shut up, Carter growled. Check out our playlist for more amazing novels. Continue. Chapter 51, The Final Execution. Carter's large hand fiercely gripped the neck of the heretic, gradually pulling harder. The heretic felt the force pulling on him, and fear mixed with reluctance crept in. He displayed a look of terror, his eyes filled with tears. "No, I can't leave this body. That was the great power bestowed upon me by the Master of 1,000 Eyes. You have no right to take it from me. No." Rip. Blood splattered. Carter violently tore out the heretic's head, along with his spine, and raised it high above his head, displaying it to the crowd. The heretic's head, still connected to his spine, wriggled in Carter's hand like a worm. With a resolute expression, Carter looked around at the crowd and loudly proclaimed, "This is the fate of all heretical scum. The governor will tolerate no heretic filth within the king's court." Instantly, the crowd erupted in cheers. The people of the territory may have had their differences, but they all shared a deep hatred for heretics. They despised these heretics even more than the chaos demons. After all, these scum were once humans, but they chose to become the lackeys of chaos, betraying and killing their own kind. It was despicable and disgusting beyond words. The people glared with utter contempt at the heretic writhing like a worm, spitting on him in disdain. The guards and enforcers saluted Carter with the aquila gesture, showing deep respect for the brave and loyal warrior. The common folk, unqualified to perform the aquila, knelt in gratitude. They thanked the angel of war for his salvation. Of course, they also offered their thanks to the great God Emperor and the merciful governor. The heretic, still struggling, continued to shout, "Fools! You damned, ignorant insects! Do you not realize that your suffering is brought upon you by the governor himself? The false emperor has never shown you any mercy. He deceived you and abandoned you. Only the Master of 1,000 Eyes can." Thud. The heretic's head was met with a heavy punch, sending his teeth flying. "Damn you, what are you doing?" Carter held the heretic's head in front of him, glaring coldly. "I'm hitting you." "What?" Thud. Another punch landed, distorting the heretic's face. Suddenly, the heretic recalled his earlier mockery of Carter, and fear surged in his heart. No, but it was too late. Carter punched him again and again until the heretic's face was a mangled mess, unrecognizable. After finishing his work, Carter tossed the heretic's head to the ground like trash, declaring, "On behalf of the governor, I hereby execute you, heretic scum." 2 Imperial guards stepped forward, flamethrowers strapped to their backs. Facing death, the heretic's head was filled with despair. As a child of the Master of 1,000 Eyes, a high-ranking being, how could his life end like this? He wasn't fearless of death. He lacked the unwavering faith and courage to sacrifice himself for it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have betrayed humanity in the first place. At this final moment, his true nature was revealed. The heretic became desperate, looking at Carter and the 2 guards. There was a glimmer of pleading in his eyes. "Merciful, no, brave warriors. You can't kill me. I still have value, more value than those wretched Underhive refugees. You've all witnessed my power. Don't you want to harness and study such great power?" Carter's gaze grew even colder. The 2 Imperial guards raised the nozzles of their flamethrowers, aiming at the heretic's head. "Damn it, I demand to see the governor. I am a noble of the Upper Hive. I know many secrets, including those of the Hoffman family. The governor won't kill me so easily." But no one cared about his words. Boom. Without hesitation, the 2 guards pulled their triggers. Twin streams of fire erupted, engulfing the heretic's head in searing flames. Heretics were not to be trusted, regardless of whether their words were true or false. This was a lesson long learned within the king's court. The best way to deal with heretics was to send them to the depths of hell as quickly as possible. Amidst the flames, the heretic's head screamed in agony, writhing like a worm along with his spine. He wanted to escape but could only helplessly writhe in place. The unbearable pain of the fire drove him mad. "No, please, let me see the governor." But his pleas were in vain. In his final moments, the heretic's gaze grew venomous as he stared at everyone around him. "Damn insects. The great Master of 1,000 Eyes will descend, and you will all die. I curse you. I curse all of you, and your descendants. You will all die in the most extreme suffering and torment." Ah! The heretic's screams echoed through the entire area. But there was no pity, for he was not worthy of any forgiveness. It wasn't until the heretic scum was completely burned to ashes in excruciating pain that the battle in this area officially came to an end. 10 kilometers from the slums, deep within the administrative unit's passageways, a crimson-skinned heretic was fleeing in terror. Bang! A shotgun shell exploded against his backside. The force of the blast knocked the heretic to the ground, but he quickly scrambled forward, not daring to stop. However, a heavy boot stomped on his lower back, preventing any further escape. Damn scum, still trying to run. In the darkness, the mechanical red glow of a bionic eye appeared, followed by the gruff voice of Ari. He carried a large shotgun, a cigar clenched between his teeth, and his foot planted firmly on the heretic's back. The guards were responsible for regular heretics, whose combat ability wasn't much greater than that of the guards themselves. He kicked the heretic hard. Still wanna run? The heretic sobbed, pleading. No, I won't run anymore. Please, sir, have mercy on me, I only did it to survive. I never wanted to do this. Alright, I get it. Ari had no interest in listening to the heretic's pathetic excuses. Every heretic's hands were stained with blood. Before being cruelly dismembered as sacrifices, many poor souls had begged this heretic for mercy. But those people had still died in agony, offered up to the false gods. So, when dealing with heretics, one had to be ruthless. Ari grabbed the heretic by the hair, forcing him to kneel on the ground. I swear, I never killed anyone, I only participated in the rituals. I wasn't the one who brought the Underhive refugees, it wasn't my fault. Ari forced a grin, patting the tearful heretic on the head, pretending to comfort him. Sure, I understand. No need to be nervous. With that, Ari clicked something into the heretic's mouth, silencing him. He aimed his gun at the heretic and stepped back to a safe distance. The heretic knelt there, completely unaware of what was in his mouth. He looked at Ari in terror. Don't be afraid, it's just a thermite charge. Ari smiled as he showed the heretic the trigger ring in his hand. The heretic's pupils dilated in horror as fear reached its peak. Poof! The thermite charge ignited, and flames engulfed the heretic, melting his upper body. Spit! Damn scum! Ari spat on the ground, turning to the approaching guards. Let's go, time to hit their lair. Chapter 52, Traitor. Tonight was a sleepless night for many families. Suddenly, the sounds of gunfire and cannon blasts echoed over the residential areas surrounding the sacred square. Unfamiliar creatures, howls and the screams of people followed soon after, causing terror among the residents. People locked their doors and windows, trembling and whispering in fear, completely unaware of what was happening. The Rapp family was no exception. They gathered in the living room, helplessly waiting. Every blast of gunfire and every howl made Marty and Lilith's hearts skip a beat. Marty hugged Lilith, her voice trembling. By the Emperor, what is happening? She was utterly terrified. This was too much like the horrific disaster from 5 years ago. Back then, heretic rebels had breached the sacred square, capturing residents for blood sacrifices. Those unfortunate souls were dismembered by the heretics, displayed in bloody inverted crosses, hung above the emperor's statue. The rebels had even reached the Lapp family's doorstep. If not for the governor's timely intervention by sending the Imperial guards, their family would have become sacrifices as well. After that night, Marty found that nearly every official's family in the area had been slaughtered by the heretics. Many friends and familiar faces had vanished. Only the Rapp family had narrowly survived. It had been a terrible nightmare. And now, was that nightmare about to repeat itself? Marty prayed helplessly. Have the heretic rebels come again? Oh no, we're doomed. Great God Emperor, merciful Governor, please protect the Rapp family. Brother, what's happening outside? I'm so scared, Lilith said anxiously, looking at her brother. Deville knelt down and patted Lilith's head. Don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. There are only scattered sounds of gunfire outside, it's not an army attacking. If it were really the heretic rebels, the king's court alarms would have already gone off. Besides, the fighting is still outside, our residential area is safe for now. So, stay at home, and there will be no danger. Just go back to sleep and cover your ears, you won't hear anything. Really? Yes, really. Now, go to sleep. You can't let this mess delay your studies tomorrow. Lilith was on a noble elite education schedule, where every bit of energy mattered under its intense workload. Hearing this, she became nervous and quickly nodded. I'll go to bed right now. Deville gently coaxed Lilith, leading her back to her room and tucking her in. Deville then turned toward the door, putting on a black coat and tucking a laspistol into his belt. Those reassuring words he said earlier were just to calm Lilith. The fighting had already reached their residential area, and no matter what, he couldn't sit by and do nothing. He was preparing to head out and see what was really happening. "Mother, I'm going out to see what's going on. Lock the door and don't go outside." Marty rushed forward, hugging Deville. Out of habit, she adjusted his collar and warned him, "Be careful, you." But she hesitated, holding back the rest of her words. "Mother, I will do my duty and serve the governor faithfully." Deville's face was resolute as he gripped the laspistol at his waist, finishing the words for her. If the heretic rebels had truly invaded, he would not choose to run away. He would pick up his weapon and bravely fight those heretics, giving his all for the governor. Seeing the determined look on Deville's face, Marty felt heartbroken and reluctant, fearing that once her son left, he might never return. But she supported Deville's decision because that was the Rapp family tradition for centuries. Loyalty to the governor was the foundation of everything. Marty wiped away her tears, speaking firmly. "Good child. Go serve the governor, and don't worry about Lilith and me." Deville nodded and resolutely turned to leave. As the door locked behind him, Deville's demeanor shifted to that of a cold, calculating officer of the king's court. He tightened his grip on the laspistol and walked toward the direction of the gunfire. After only a short distance, Deville rounded a corner and suddenly came face to face with a crimson bionic eye. Startled, he instinctively raised his laspistol. However, the next moment, his nose was struck hard, and a large hand clamped over his mouth, the stench of burnt flesh faintly emanating from it. Ari growled in a low voice. "We're hunting heretics. Don't make a sound. If those damned scum get away, you'll be dead for sure. Do you understand?" The pain in his nose made Deville's eyes well up with tears. He nodded in pain, indicating that he understood. Soon, Deville felt the large hand covering his mouth loosen, and he took a deep breath. But before he could fully recover, his nose was struck again by the butt of a shotgun, the intense pain causing him to moan. Yet, before he could make a sound, his mouth was covered again. Ari sternly warned, "I told you to stay quiet, and here you are making noise again." Deville felt a wave of grievance and, muffling his voice, barely managed to say, "I didn't say anything." Finally, the hand covering Deville's mouth released him once more, and he instinctively covered his nose and mouth, fearing another strike. He and Ari stared at each other, both a little disgruntled from their earlier encounter. Ari kept his voice low, his face slightly awkward as if he had just realized who Deville was. He took a puff from a cigar he had looted from a noble's house during a heretic purge, blowing the smoke into Deville's face. Well, if it isn't our quartermaster from logistics. What a misunderstanding earlier. No hard feelings. You should head home now. This heretic hunting operation is dangerous, not really suited for a pretty boy like you." Those words stung Deville's pride. He tightened his grip on his laspistol, his resolve firm. "Scum, I am also a combatant of the king's court, and it is my duty to purge heretics for the governor. Besides, I'm a resident of this area, and I know the terrain better than you." Seeing Deville's determination, Ari shrugged and agreed. "All right, follow along then. Just don't blame me if you die." Deville followed Ari for a while, only to realize that he had been played by the rough one-eyed man. Ari seemed to sense Deville's mood and put his arm around his shoulders, wiping his dirty hands on Deville's black coat. Hey, it was just a little misunderstanding earlier, just 2 light taps. I apologize, all right." Deville swallowed his anger, unwilling to stoop to the same level as this brute. As they continued walking, Deville grew more and more familiar with the path, and a sense of unease crept into his heart. Where are the heretics hiding? Ari bit down on his cigar, pointing ahead to a nearby door. There. That house was hiding heretics and has killed many people. Seeing the familiar logistics department insignia on the door, Deville froze. He controlled his emotions and lowered his voice. You're mistaken. That family is one of the most loyal in the king's court. There's no way they'd be colluding with heretics, let alone be traitors. Chapter 53, The Fate of a Traitor. Deville found it impossible to believe that there could be a traitor among the logistics division. And worse, a traitor who had colluded with chaos heretics. Everyone who joined the logistics division had undergone strict vetting. Most of their families had contributed to the king's court for generations, serving the governor faithfully. Moreover, the family Ari had accused was none other than that of Vass, Deville's mentor in the logistics division. When Deville first joined the division, Vass had helped him immensely. He also learned that Vass's family had served the governor for nearly 1,000 years, with several ancestors dying on the job or from exhaustion. Vass had even received commendations from the Spire estate for his hard work. At that time, Deville had secretly vowed to follow in Vass's footsteps and bring honor to his own family. But now, that crude one-eyed brute Aerie was claiming that Vass was a traitor, possibly even a heretic. Deville simply couldn't believe it. Aerie, however, didn't care whether Deville believed him or not. With a cigar clenched in his teeth and a shotgun slung over his shoulder, he said, "Come on, pretty boy, whether it's true or not, we'll know once we search the place." With that, Aerie and several guards stormed forward, kicking the door open. "Open up, we're here to check. What are you doing?" Dad. Vass's family, dressed in their nightclothes, were clearly flustered. But Vass recognized the guards and stood tall, placing himself between them and his wife and son, angrily rebuking them. "You're with the guards. Who gave you the right to allow these lower hive scum in here? Get out, right now. According to the laws of the king's court, you'll be executed for this." The guards hesitated at Vass's anger. After all, he was a legitimate official of the logistics division, holding authority over the distribution of the guards' supplies. His status was far above that of these lower hive refugees. Aerie, unfazed, stepped forward and stood before the guards, shotgun resting on his shoulder. "You're suspected of colluding with heretics. We're here to search your home." After all, this was the family district of an important unit within the king's court, and proper procedure had to be followed. Vass's expression remained unchanged. "A search? You guards have no authority to search a logistics official." Aerie cocked his shotgun, pointing it at Vass. "Damn you. This is an order directly from the governor. Besides, the guards answer directly to the governor, just like you. Now step aside, or I'll blow your head off." This location had been marked by the governor himself, so there could be no mistake. After the events of the night, Aerie was completely in awe of the governor's wisdom and godlike insight. No heretic could escape his watchful eyes. If Vass resisted, Aerie had the authority to execute him on the spot. "You won't fool me. The governor would never give such an order." Vass stood firm in disbelief. "Mentor, I believe you are innocent, but the governor's orders are not to be questioned." The heavy sound of boots echoed as Deville entered. He stood before Vass and his family. "Allow me to conduct the search, that way these crude brutes won't mess up your home." Vass, looking at his colleague in the black coat with a golden lion badge and a cold expression, finally began to panic. "Deville, you." Deville approached Aerie, pulling a document from his coat pocket and showing it to Vass. "You recognize this, right? It's an order from the Spire estate." Aerie felt a bit guilty. It was Kays who had slipped the document into his pocket, and he hadn't used it until now. Seeing the document, Vass's face turned pale, and he tried to plead. "Deville, it's so late. You know the consequences of defying the governor's orders." Deville's expression grew even colder as he sensed something was off about his mentor. Or rather, he felt that Vass had changed. His mentor no longer seemed as loyal to the governor as he once was. Holding the document high, Deville issued orders to the group. "Watch them closely. Everyone must carry out the governor's orders, no one is to interfere. Anyone who resists will be executed on the spot. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." The guards received the order. Aerie then turned to Deville. "Do you understand?" Deville was momentarily stunned, but seeing Aerie and the guards all watching him, he reluctantly responded. "Yes, sir." Deville nodded, carefully folding the document and returning it to Aerie's pocket before turning to Vass. "Mentor, I will now conduct the search. If I offend in any way, I ask for your forgiveness." "Fine, search away. The truth will prove my loyalty to the governor." Vass showed no fear and stepped aside. Without comment, Deville searched the rooms one by one, finding nothing unusual. "Have you found anything?" All the rooms seemed normal, nothing suspicious. Deville glanced at Aerie and shook his head. Vass approached, looking at Deville and the others. "Well, then, this proves my loyalty. Now, can you leave? My family and I need rest." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, while Aerie furrowed his brow. "How can this be? The governor himself marked this place. It can't be wrong. The governor is never wrong. Do you not smell something strange?" "Smell?" Aerie sniffed the air. "Yeah, I smell something, it's kinda sweet." "That's a special type of nano incense. As far as I know, that incense is used to mask the smell of corpses. And the area covered by the incense happens to be this living room." Vass immediately shouted at Deville, "Nonsense. Look around this living room, what could possibly be wrong? We'll find out soon enough." From Vass's panicked glances, Deville had already figured out where the hidden mechanism was. He walked to the wall lamp in the living room, examined it briefly, and pulled it down with force. The floor beneath them trembled slightly as the mechanism began to move. It wasn't surprising that Vass's family had installed hidden mechanisms after 1,000 years of inheritance. But what followed left everyone stunned. In the center of the living room, the floor sank, and an iron bed covered in strange symbols rose from below. On the bed lay the corpse of a young girl wrapped in thin film. Her face was twisted in fear and pain, and her body had been dissected. Above her, the rusted ceiling slowly opened, revealing a hidden space. The ceiling was inscribed with a blood-drawn ritual circle, and several dried corpses hung from it. Is this your loyalty to the governor? Is this how your family repays the governor's grace? Your actions have brought shame upon your ancestors, and I am ashamed to have known you. Seeing this, Deville was filled with rage. This was the most despicable form of betrayal. Vass's actions would bring shame upon the entire logistics division, leaving them unable to face the governor or their colleagues. Deville drew his las pistol, pointing it at Vass. Vass, realizing he had been exposed, fell to his knees, trembling. Deville, I didn't betray the governor. I never acted against the king's court. I did all of this just to save my wife's life. She had an incurable disease. Those sacrifices were just some underhive people on the verge of starving to death. I traded food for them with their families. Surely you wouldn't punish me for these lowly underhive scum, would you? Deville's gaze turned even colder. Treachery is a dagger that pierces the soul, an unforgivable sin. Since you've chosen betrayal, prepare to face the governor's wrath. Die, lapdog of the false emperor. At that moment, Vass's wife suddenly revealed sharp fangs. She transformed into a monstrous creature and lunged at Deville. No. Vass tried to stop her, but it was too late. Boom. The powerful blast of a Rise shotgun sent the creature that had once been Vass's wife flying against the wall. The guards immediately opened fire, shredding the monster until it was nothing but a mangled mass of flesh, silent and still. Vass, staring at his dead wife, was consumed by grief and rage, quickly reaching for his gun. But Deville was faster, shooting Vass directly in the head, the loss beam piercing through his skull. Vass fell dead. The gunfire ceased, leaving only the sound of pitiful sobbing in the room. Of Vass's family, only one remained alive. Vass's son, terrified, was crying uncontrollably, calling out for his parents. Deville stepped forward. He looked down at the pitiful child, showing a brief moment of sympathy. Chapter 54, Dawn approaches. Deville felt a twinge of guilt. After all, they had just executed this child's parents right in front of him. By the end of the night, all of the privileges enjoyed by the Vass family would be revoked. The only son of Vass, and all remaining members of their extended family, would be exiled to the lower hive through special channels. This was an extremely harsh punishment, one that all families loyal to the governor feared most. Deville could imagine the suffering this child would face in the future. But at the very least, he would live. Even if only for a little while longer. If a stranger from the king's court had been in charge, the child would certainly not have been spared. This was the only mercy Deville could offer to his former mentor, Vass. Unfortunately, that mercy was misplaced. Looking at the child, Deville could see the deep hatred brewing in his eyes, and he sighed inwardly. That was not the look a normal child should have. Bew. Suddenly, Deville raised his las pistol and pulled the trigger. The laser beam struck its target squarely. The boy clutched his chest, blood-red eyes full of even deeper hatred, his body beginning to mutate. He screamed and charged at Deville. But the next second, another laser pierced his head. Deville calmly pulled the trigger again and again, until the energy in his las pistol was depleted. Clang! The smoldering body of Vass's son collapsed, and a small blood-stained dagger fell from his hand. Deville stood in silence, staring at the body, lost in thought. I told you, Aerie spat, walking over to pat Deville on the shoulder. These heretic scum aren't even human. Trust them, and you're as good as dead. Deville's expression returned to its cold demeanor. I know, I was just reflecting. These traitors enjoyed the governor's grace, yet they showed no gratitude or loyalty. Instead, they walked the path of heresy, destroying the efforts of generations in a single stroke. I despise these traitors. This is the price of disloyalty. Aerie scratched his head. Joining the heretics, dying like this is too easy for them. If I hadn't run out of thermite charges, I would have cooked these scum. He turned to leave, calling back to Deville. Come on, pretty boy. Someone else will handle this mess. Aerie and Deville exited the house one after the other. They looked up at the darkened sky, unsure of what to say. At that moment, the sounds of gunfire and explosions began to quiet down. The battle in the residential areas around the sacred square had come to an end. The Imperial guards gathered their fallen comrades and the 14 sealed jars of chaos essence, then boarded their assault ships to return to the king's court. They had lost 3 guards in this battle. For the king's court, this was no small loss. But fortunately, the guards had fulfilled the governor's trust, successfully containing the crisis and preventing the spread of chaos. The defense forces began to regroup and return to their posts. The enforcers, however, were the busiest. Not only did they have to escort the surviving prisoners, but they also had to organize efforts to calm the panicked citizens. Claude was overwhelmed, calling in even more enforcers. He swore that the enforcers had never been so courteous. They not only had to pacify those damned lower hive dwellers, but also help put out fires, locate missing persons, and treat injuries. But those were the governor's orders, and Claude had to follow them to the letter. If he didn't, the governor wouldn't spare him. Claude patiently explained to the people through a mechanical loudspeaker drone. Tonight, it was the vile heretics from the Hoffman family who invaded, but thanks to the great governor's war angels, they were all dealt with. Along the way, we also took care of the gang leaders who had been oppressing you. The residents cheered in response. At the same time, Claude ordered the enforcers to stay vigilant and maintain order in their assigned areas. Anyone attempting to stir up trouble would be executed on the spot. Mercy alone wasn't enough, an iron fist was also needed to prevent chaos. This had been Claude's rule ever since he took charge. The mercy granted to the lower hive dwellers by the governor should never be an excuse for them to cause trouble. Such behavior would be a far greater blasphemy. In the Drake residential district, Alia was praying, hoping that the God Emperor and the governor would protect her and bring an end to this terrifying chaos quickly. Otherwise, it would affect her work at the factory. If she didn't get her paycheck today, she would starve and be unable to move. Fortunately, as if in answer to her prayers, the gunfire ceased, and the curfew was lifted. A shrill bell rang out in the residential corridors, signaling that it was time for people to wake up and prepare for work. Thank the Emperor, it's finally over. Alia sighed in relief, mustering the strength to get up and join the workers heading to the factory. Hey, this damn sky is finally lighting up. Eri took a long drag from what remained of his cigar, gazing at the faint sun in the sky. Indeed, the sky was lightening. Deville looked up at that faint light. As the sunlight pierced through the hazy fog, the long and bloody night had finally come to an end. At the Spire estate of the king's court, Eden lay in a soft bed, sleeping peacefully until the gentle morning sunlight finally woke him. It had been a long night, during which the armed forces of the king's court had followed his orders to carry out a cleansing operation. When Eden awoke, everything was as he had planned, peace had been restored. This was the privilege of being the governor, he didn't need to risk his life in battle, fighting desperately. His loyal soldiers would shed blood and make sacrifices to eliminate all enemies for him. His will was his power, and it extended wherever he desired. Even though his current power was but a fraction of what it had once been at his peak, he remained confident. Eden believed that he would reclaim his planet. And once he had regained his strength, he would conquer the stars, bringing more planets lost in the dark corners of the Imperium under his rule, until his name was feared across the galaxy. Of course, that was all in the future. For now, he was still in the beginner's zone, yet to defeat even the first boss. At this moment, Eden felt invigorated, his body had grown stronger again. In one night, he had gained 50,000 points of hope power. The faith of the people was nourishing his body. Initially, Eden had thought that the aftermath of the chaos would deepen people's fear, reducing the amount of hope power he could collect. But things had turned out quite the opposite. The locations he had marked for heretics and gang leaders had been so accurate that the entire battle had been contained within a manageable range, avoiding significant damage and casualties. Plus, the rumors he had spread before were still circulating among the people. Most of the population had heard the whispers. The governor was blessed by the emperor and would destroy all evil, driving away the darkness, and ensuring everyone would eat wood-pulp bread. And tonight, the governor had truly sent his war angels to wipe out the heretics and the oppressive gang leaders. The rumors were coming true. If the evil was gone, then could the wood-pulp bread be far behind? Moreover, by dipping into next month's grain reserves, Eden had managed to increase the people's food rations. Although it was still less than before the rationing cuts, this small increase brought immense joy to the workers struggling to survive. They wouldn't starve to death. These combined factors led some to start believing in the rumors, and in Eden, their governor. As a result, the hope power surged dramatically. Hope power had increased significantly, but Eden wasn't entirely happy. For some reason, he felt a vague sense of unease. Chapter 55, Let It Pretend to be a Servitor. After getting out of bed, Eden immediately summoned Baev to report on the details of last night's cleansing operation. Upon hearing the report, Eden was deeply concerned. The release of just one vial of chaos bio-weaponry had cost him 3 Imperial guards. Even his strongest warrior, Carter, had suffered minor injuries. If he hadn't discovered those chaos bio-weapons ahead of time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Fortunately, it was all over now. Governor, all of the targets you marked have been eliminated. Now, we can proceed with the preparations for the Emperor's Ascension Day. Baev looked at Eden with growing reverence. The damned traitorous Hoffman family had launched such a vile attack on the king's court. If not for the governor's divine-like powers of reconnaissance, the king's court would have suffered great losses. By the way, make sure to properly compensate the families of the guards who sacrificed their lives in the battle. Have their names inscribed on the monument at the foot of the Emperor's statue. Eden instructed Baev, from now on, all warriors who fall in battle should be properly compensated. You'll be in charge of planning it. In the past, there was no such thing as compensation in the king's court. Warriors were expected to fight bravely and sacrifice themselves if necessary. It was a symbol of loyalty. It wasn't just the king's court, even the Astra Militarum rarely had such compensation. When the Astra Militarum left their homeworlds to fight across the galaxy, they ventured farther and farther away. So far, in fact, that with a mortal's brief lifespan, it would be impossible to return home, even if they spent their entire life traveling aboard a ship. Unless a soldier demonstrated extraordinary ability and earned exceptional honors, thus rising to the rank of officer, there was only a slim chance of ever returning home. Even for officers, it was rare. For regular guardsmen, it was unthinkable. Once they left their home planet, they were essentially saying goodbye to their families forever. Their fate would either be death on the battlefield or, if they were lucky, dying of old age in a foreign land. And after their deaths, it would be nearly impossible to track their identity or home planet. Given the vast distances, delivering compensation to their families was practically impossible. Even if compensation were to be sent, by the time it arrived, it would likely have been several generations since the soldier had passed. Whether their family even remembered them was uncertain. For these reasons, compensation had never really been a consideration. Eden briefly explained his understanding of the compensation process to Baev before handing the task over to him. He believed Baev would be able to formulate a suitable compensation plan, given the current resources of the king's court. Baev nodded in agreement. Governor, I will devise an appropriate compensation plan. On behalf of the warriors, I thank you for your generosity. Afterward, Eden and Baev discussed the process for the upcoming ceremony. Once satisfied with the answers, Eden urged Baev to check on the progress of the Emperor's statue construction. Eden was grateful to have someone like Baev as his steward. His energy seemed boundless, and he could handle multiple tasks simultaneously. Without him, Eden feared he might collapse from exhaustion. Everything had been set in motion, and the Emperor's Ascension Day was just 3 days away. All Eden had to do was appear at the ceremony, make a promise to his people, and that would be enough. Then, he would gather enough hope power to open the portal and send himself to the Green Wave farm on the Space Hulk. There, he would obtain the advanced farming techniques and food resources, along with an automated robot. Currently, the administrative methods in the king's court were too outdated. There was no internet, and in some ways, it was worse than the world he had come from. He had to get the internet up and running as soon as possible so that he could implement modern communication and management systems. As for digital demons or rogue codes, he wasn't worried. He'd simply use the small sun to bless the servers for protection. He could create a few sacred relics with the blessing of the small sun, then gather some priests. They could perform rituals and sprinkle holy water on the servers daily to ensure their protection. Right now, the servers were only operating within the territory, so protecting them wasn't too difficult. It wasn't like the Golden Throne, where the Emperor sat, maintaining the Astronomicon, a massive beacon network that spanned the galaxy. The strain of managing such servers across entire star systems, sectors, and even regions was unimaginable. No wonder they had to burn through so many psychers. In any case, once he had the farming technology, and the servers for the internet set up, it would drastically reduce administrative costs and increase productivity. The only tricky part was that robot. The Imperium strictly forbade the use of AI robots. If Eden really brought back an AI robot, symbolizing hatred of intelligence, it would surely incite fear or opposition from the people. If the Imperium found out, it would cause serious trouble. But then again, Urth was now in the Imperium's dark zone. The Imperium had no control over him anymore. Eden had made up his mind, he had to bring that AI robot back. At worst, he'd disguise it. Put it in a robe, weld the Imperial Aquila on it, and pass it off as a servitor. As long as Eden didn't admit it was an AI, who could challenge him? Everything was moving in the direction Eden had hoped for. He allowed himself to relax a bit, leaning back in his throne to rest. But for some reason, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. Suddenly, a sharp sense of foreboding struck Eden. Darkness, pure and overwhelming darkness. He looked toward the Hoffman family's territory, his psychic senses faintly picking up on something terrible brewing there. It was a terrifying chaos monstrosity, a creation of the dark gods. If it were allowed to fully mature, his territory would be powerless to stop its attack. However, Eden couldn't risk starting a war with the Hoffman family directly. Based on the strength they displayed yesterday, even if he won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. The only ones to benefit would be the Grey Wolf gang. Fortunately, there was still some time before that monstrosity was fully birthed. Eden's only option now was to race against time, betting that he could gather enough hope power to restore his strength before the Hoffman family unleashed that creature. Actually, Eden had another concern. After last night's battle, the Hoffman family might have already uncovered the vulnerabilities of the king's court. If they chose to launch more attacks during the Emperor's Ascension Day, things could get very complicated. As Eden brooded, in the secret laboratory of the Hoffman family's territory. Squeak, squeak, squeak. In a glass chamber, a mutated grey rat gnawed happily on a severed hand, looking quite content. Its eyes were unusually bright, hinting at a level of intelligence. Yusuf had noticed this and ordered the rat to be kept alive, growing rather fond of it. At that moment, Yusuf gently stroked the grey rat, as if petting a small pet. He was waiting for news. Not long ago, he had received reports of gunfire within the king's court's territory. It seemed they had opted for a large-scale purge. The heretics he had sent there would have immediately released the chaos essence, unleashing those terrible mutated creatures. Suffering would soon spread throughout the king's court. Cackle, cackle. Yusuf was pleased, imagining that the residential areas around the sacred square had already been turned into a wasteland, with countless casualties. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 56, The King's Court Has Hidden Strength. Yusuf's mind was filled with thoughts of victory, as he could already picture Eden's terrified face. Fear. You should be terrified. Because you are facing me, Yusuf, the true future ruler of Urth. The mere thought of fulfilling his family's 1,000-year-old dream and crowning himself king filled Yusuf with excitement. Squeak, squeak. The mutated grey rat finished gnawing on the flesh and squeaked again, its eyes full of desire as it gazed at Yusuf's hand. But it didn't dare bite him, knowing all too well how powerful this human was after suffering at his hands. Feeling quite pleased, Yusuf tossed another severed hand from the nearby bucket of flesh to the rat. Eat more, you cute little thing. He couldn't help but praise the rat, which looked like a small dog, its dark red skin covered in several pitch-black eyes. Not far away, the researchers kept their distance, nervously attending to their tasks. Their lord, Yusuf, had grown increasingly erratic and cruel. Many had been brutally killed for seemingly no reason at all. The researchers feared making even the slightest mistake, dreading that they might be fed to the monstrous rat. The elevator in the laboratory descended, and the leader of the heretics, marked with the symbol of the broken eye on his forehead, entered. He knelt before Yusuf. Master, there's news from the king's court. Get up, tell me, how's the situation there? What did that useless fool Eden do? He must be terrified, right? Yusuf stood up, eagerly questioning the heretic leader. Nothing happened. The heretic leader raised his head, his face dark. The loyal followers we sent didn't cause any real damage. The chaos was quelled in a single night. There was barely any panic or fear among the people, and order in the residential areas was restored quickly. Yusuf froze for a moment. Impossible. There's no way something like this could happen. Anger surged within him as his gaze shifted to the mutated gray rat, which was happily chewing on bones. "Get out of my sight, you damn thing!" Squeak. The mutated rat squealed as Yusuf kicked it, sending it scurrying to the other side of its glass enclosure. It didn't even have time to grab its bone before it ran, too scared to retrieve it. What had just happened? A moment ago, this human had called it cute, and now he was kicking it. Ignoring the rat, Yusuf turned his furious gaze to the heretic leader. Was there a problem with the plan? Given the current strength of the king's court, the only way they could stop the mutants would be with mass human wave tactics, followed by relentless bombardments with heavy firepower. Otherwise, it would be impossible to deal with those mutants so easily. The plan went perfectly. It's just that the people of the king's court reacted too quickly, and they were too strong. The battle ended so fast that many of our followers didn't even have time to react before they were wiped out. The king's court easily dismantled the attack. My lord, our plan has failed. Failed. Just like that, we failed. Yusuf felt humiliated beyond belief. He had been defeated by that incompetent Eden. How could that be? No, we didn't fail. This was a successful test. We forced the king's court to reveal its hidden strength. Yusuf was resolute. If I'm not mistaken, the king's court has concealed an even greater power than the Imperial guards. They've hidden it for thousands of years without ever exposing it. What a cunning and deceitful family, those Grants. At that moment, Yusuf thought back to everything the Hoffman family had endured. Thousands of years ago, it was the Grant family's treacherous schemes that stole the governorship of Urth. For centuries, Yusuf's family had been oppressed, enduring countless hardships. Now, it was up to him, Yusuf, the most outstanding descendant of the Hoffman family, to face this formidable enemy. This attack wasn't a loss. It was a massive victory. With just a small scheme, the Grant family had been forced to reveal their hidden power that had been concealed for millennia. This proved they had no other options left. Yusuf looked at the heretic leader, clearly satisfied. This plan was a great success, you did well. The heretic leader was bewildered. Had they won? How had they won? What was Yusuf even talking about? Though confused, he dared not question his master. He would never do anything that could undermine his master's dignity. Too many examples had shown that challenging the master's dignity led to extreme suffering and torment. After thinking for a moment, the heretic leader steeled himself. Master, since we've succeeded, shouldn't we proceed with the next attack? We can send in more followers, carrying more of the great Lord of all Eyes' essence. Even if we can't cause massive destruction, we could at least ruin the corpse emperor's ceremony. The mere thought of the king's court holding a ceremony to honor the corpse emperor made his skin crawl, nearly driving him mad. He had to ruin the ceremony. He couldn't let it happen. How he longed to storm the corpse emperor's shrine, to defile and desecrate it. But his plan was rejected by Yusuf. That's a foolish plan. The king's court has already activated its hidden powers, making another attack unlikely to succeed. We can't send anyone else, and we definitely can't waste any more precious chaos essence there. It would only slow down the progress of our experiments. Yusuf's gaze shifted toward the massive glass incubation tank in the lab, where a grotesque mass of flesh, covered in black, blinking eyes, throbbed and pulsated. It was the grotesquely swollen abdomen of a pregnant woman, twisted and deformed to an unnatural size, while her upper body and limbs remained normal. The sight was horribly distorted and terrifying. Inside that monstrous belly, the embryo of a demon was growing. The king's court's hidden powers may be formidable. But we have something far greater, the embryo bestowed upon us by the Lord of all Eyes. Once it is fully developed, and the true offspring of the Lord of all Eyes is born, it will unleash ultimate nightmare power. It will become the most powerful being on this planet. No matter what the king's court does, they won't be able to stop this divine force. The heretic leader wanted to argue, but ultimately lowered his head. Yes, my lord. The Lord of all Eyes will grant us power, and all will happen as you wish. Yusuf ordered the researchers. At any cost, give the host more nutrients to accelerate the growth of the embryo. Following his command, the researchers pulled down several levers. Massive amounts of colorful liquids flowed through hollow tubes, injecting into the pregnant woman's body and belly. She writhed and screamed in agony, her suffering almost tangible. Yusuf watched it all with fanatical excitement. This was his true strength. He was tired of schemes. This time, he would face them head-on, using absolute power to destroy the king's court. All he had to do now was wait. Wait for the true offspring of the Lord of all eyes to arrive in this world. Chapter 57, Final Preparations for the Ceremony. Eden's psychic senses detected the slow growth of chaos power in the Hoffman family's territory. Fortunately, there was still some time before the final release. For now, the most important matter was the Emperor's Ascension Day. If the ceremony went wrong, there would be no need for the Hoffman family to unleash their creatures, the king's court would fall into chaos on its own. So Eden quickly turned all his attention toward the preparations for the ceremony. With the event just 3 days away, the basic structure was already in place. On the day of the Emperor's ascension, the king's court would halt all work for an unprecedented day, distributing free food to the people. Everyone would have the opportunity to rest. They could either join the street parades or devote themselves to the worship rituals dedicated to the God Emperor. This was a blessing from the great God Emperor and the kind governor, a gift everyone could enjoy. Except for the Imperial guards, defense forces, and enforcers. They would be responsible for security, with their day off postponed by 1 day. The grand ceremony would take place at the Sacred Square, the main venue of the Emperor's Ascension Day. Those fortunate enough to gain entry to the Sacred Square would receive blessings before the statue of the God Emperor, adorned with gold and jewels. Each person would also receive consecrated bread and holy water from the church. The most important part of the ceremony was Eden's speech as governor. In truth, it was just him making promises to the people. As soon as the promises were made, divine miracles would appear. Then Eden would simply wait for the surge of hope power to flow in. If everything went smoothly, he would gather enough hope power to secure critical resources that could turn the tide in his favor. This was the plan. Now, the entire king's court was dedicated to making this happen, and most of the arrangements were already in place. The only thing left unresolved was the list of people who would attend the ceremony at the Sacred Square. The front row attendees and those marching in the parade were easy to determine. They would be members of families loyal to the king's court, key officials from important departments, and officers from various military forces. Their family members would also be included. This part was straightforward and had already been rehearsed. The real challenge was selecting the common citizens who would attend the ceremony. Which of them would be deemed worthy of entering the Sacred Square? According to the plan, about 50,000 citizens were to be admitted into the square to receive blessings. They were the main source of hope power. Emotions were contagious. Eden expected that once these people returned home, they would inspire others. They would serve as a node, spreading that energy to more people. These individuals played a crucial role, and couldn't be randomly chosen. The square would be packed with a dense crowd during the ceremony. If any heretics or malcontents managed to slip in and detonate a bio-bomb or launch an attack, it would be disastrous. Such an event would immediately trigger mass panic. The resulting stampede and chaos would turn the ceremony into a tragedy, with heavy casualties. The collective fear and despair of so many people gathered in one place could be catastrophic. At that point, not only would the collection of hope power fail, but it could even summon a chaos demon on the spot. That's why the list of citizens was so important. It required thorough vetting. Only those who were devout followers of the God Emperor, loyal to the king's court, and hard-working individuals would be allowed to attend. The task of selecting these citizens was assigned to a newly created department that Eden had established the day before. This new department, called the Secretariat, was led by Bayev and staffed by a group of young officials who were absolutely loyal to the governor. The Secretariat operated independently of all other departments and answered directly to the governor. They had considerable authority. When deployed, they could act in the governor's name to mobilize other departments to assist in handling affairs. In essence, Eden had carved out a new group from the existing structure of the king's court. These officials combined the roles of the governor's emissaries and intelligence officers, assisting Bayev in handling sensitive and critical tasks. They were young and not yet set in their ways, making them prime candidates for future grooming. This was part of Eden's long-term plan for reform. The Secretariat was currently labeled as a temporary department in the records, not part of the official hierarchy, giving Eden the flexibility to make adjustments or upgrades in the future. In time, this group of young officials would play a larger role, injecting fresh blood into the king's court. This ceremony would be their first assignment. Bayev quickly arranged the Secretariat's headquarters, located not far from the Spire estate. The building had previously been used by the Department of Internal Affairs but was now vacated for the Secretariat's use. Though the internal affairs staff were disgruntled, they moved out quickly. After all, it was the governor's order, no one dared defy it. All of the officials in the king's court understood that a powerful new political force was on the rise. The Secretariat had already seized a portion of the Internal Affairs Department's authority. In the future, it might claim even more. At this moment, 200 young officials of the Secretariat were standing in formation at their new headquarters, waiting for Eden's arrival. They wore the Secretariat's black formal coats, black leather boots, and armbands bearing the insignia of a red background with a golden lion, a more dignified design than before. Each of them was armed with the most advanced laspistols currently available in the king's court. According to Eden's plan, these officials would eventually be assigned assistants in elite military units, enabling them to carry out their tasks within the king's court unimpeded. Of course, this would be done gradually, and everything would be fully equipped after the ceremony. Deville stood in the front row, his face cold and expressionless. This was the proper demeanor for an official of the body retrieval unit in the logistics department. It was also the expected attitude of the governor's enforcers. When they went out into the field, they would act as the governor's emissaries, embodying his authority. After waiting for some time, Bayev led Eden into the headquarters to review the officials of the Secretariat. Eden glanced at their attire and nodded in approval. Very good, this is exactly what I had in mind. As always, his steward was reliable. Seeing that the governor was pleased, Bayev finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Governor, for your wise guidance. Without it, I wouldn't have known what to do. Steward Bayev, you've worked hard, Eden said, even more satisfied, patting Bayev on the shoulder. Bayev could get things done and knew how to flatter, what more could a leader want? Eden walked over to Deville and the others, carefully observing them. As he watched, Eden's brow furrowed, his expression growing darker by the second. Deville, standing in the front row, noticed the governor's frown and grew increasingly tense. Could the governor be dissatisfied? Tisk, this isn't quite right. Eden muttered, thinking hard before finally speaking up, his eyes locking on Deville. Especially you. Deville's heart sank upon hearing those words. He could barely stand from the shock. Chapter 58, The Workers. Deville never expected that he, who had always been exemplary, would be publicly questioned by the governor. He felt an overwhelming sense of injustice, almost to the point of tears. Still, he struggled to maintain his composure, trying to preserve his dignity. Without the governor asking, he didn't dare inquire where he had fallen short. But regardless, if the governor said he wasn't good enough, then he wasn't good enough. As Deville wrestled with his emotions, trying to keep his thoughts under control, Eden turned to Popov, standing beside him. This comrade here is doing well, everyone should take him as an example. Really? Popov, who had never received any praise before, especially not from the governor, could hardly contain his excitement. He instinctively asked. Then he quickly realized how disrespectful it was to question the governor and immediately shut his mouth. It's true, young man. Keep up the good work. All for the governor. Popov stood tall, filled with pride. When he returned home, he would certainly tell his parents about this. To be personally praised by the governor was an honor that would be recorded in his family's history. What an immense honor. Deville, watching Popov barely suppressing his excitement, found it even more unbelievable. Why? How could that coward Popov be better than him? Soon, Eden explained the reasoning to everyone. You're all too serious and too cold. You should smile more. You represent the governor's image, and I need you to show enough approachability. You need to be able to connect with the people, to communicate well enough to gather the information we need. That's something you must do. The officials of the Secretariat were acting as the governor's emissaries. If they were too cold and made people fear them completely, it would negatively impact the governor's image. At least for now, he needed to leave a kind image in the minds of the people. Upon hearing the governor's request, Deville and the other young officials immediately forced smiles. However, they hadn't smiled in front of people in such a long time, making their expressions awkward. Eden looked at them and nodded. In any case, your primary task is to smile and show enough friendliness. I trust you can manage that. Yes, sir. However, when facing enemies and corrupt individuals, you must show them your ruthlessness and cold-blooded nature. You need to strike fear into their hearts and show them what the wrath of thunder truly means. Understood. Yes, sir. That was Eden's purpose in selecting this group. They needed to be approachable but also capable of extreme ruthlessness when required. I believe you all understand what I mean. Now, let Steward Bayev assign you your tasks. Eden's work was done, and from here on, it was Bayev's responsibility. He would assign the young officials to various regions, such as mines and factories, to select the right citizens for the ceremony. The process involved the king's court issuing orders, instructing each area to submit a list of names according to specific requirements. They would select active individuals to represent the people, forming a procession into the sacred square. The Secretariat's task was to review these lists, ensuring there was no fraud and determining whether to add or remove people. If anyone was found to be deceiving or disrespecting the governor, they would be judged accordingly. Soon, Bayev had the plan in motion. Deville and Popov were assigned to the same group, becoming partners. They headed to the factory district to carry out the selection task. Riding in a hovercar toward the factory area, Popov couldn't help but ask, "Deville, why do you keep staring at me? Is there something on my face?" "Nothing," Deville replied with a blank expression, turning his face away. He would never admit that he was trying to learn how to smile by observing Popov. Out of Popov's sight, Deville practiced smiling in silence. He swore that next time he saw the governor, he would present the most perfect smile. He would smile even better than Popov. As Deville and the others made their way to the factory district, the factory managers scrambled to prepare for the governor's emissaries' arrival. To avoid leaving a bad impression on the emissaries, the factory directors ordered workers to work overtime to clean and tidy the factory thoroughly. Supervisors became even more diligent in overseeing the workers, allowing no slacking off. Yet none of the workers complained. 2 days ago, the king's court had issued a notice that a select number of active workers would be chosen to attend the emperor's Ascension Day at the sacred square. These chosen individuals would receive the emperor's blessing and be given consecrated bread and holy water from the church. It was an opportunity beyond measure. In the past, when the emperor's Ascension Day had been celebrated, only the directors of large factories had the privilege of being invited by the nobles to the sacred square in the upper hive to receive blessings. But this time, everyone had a chance. For the workers from the lower hive, this was an unparalleled blessing. They didn't even need supervision, they worked harder than ever, fearing that if they slacked off, they might lose this precious opportunity. They prayed silently, hoping they would be selected. Arila, working diligently on the assembly line, desperately hoped to be chosen as one of the active workers. Cough. She coughed but quickly stifled the sound. Her mask was broken, but she didn't dare speak up. According to regulations, workers could only replace their masks once a month. The last worker who had complained about a broken mask had been whipped by the supervisor. At this critical moment, if she were beaten for such a mistake, she might lose her chance to be selected as an active worker. Fortunately, she was the fastest worker on the line, with the highest product output. She was sure to be chosen. But it was so hard to bear. The noxious fumes seeped through the gap in her mask, and the wounds on her face made the pain unbearable, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. Arila, you can do it. Just hold on a little longer. Just as Arila felt she could no longer endure, the supervisor finally announced a break. She could finally catch her breath. Soon, the list of active workers would be announced, and the workers gathered nervously, discussing the Emperor's Ascension Day. They were full of hope, as this might be the greatest honor the lower hive workers could ever receive. From birth to death, the workers lived their lives unnoticed, with no praise or mourning. But now, the governor was offering them such a great honor. Arila didn't join the discussion. She was always invisible, not well acquainted with her colleagues, and people often forgot she existed. She listened to their praises of the governor, and in her heart, she couldn't help but think, the governor truly is a kind man. Soon, the supervisor pulled out a list, the preliminary selection of active workers. At that moment, everyone's hearts were in their throats. Chapter 59, The Arrival of the Emissaries. Arila hoped, desperately, that her name would appear on the list. If it did, she would be able to go to the sacred square, to see the emperor's statue and the benevolent governor with her own eyes. There were 10 spots available on the third production line. One by one, the overseer read off the names. Each worker whose name was called wept with joy, kneeling in gratitude to the emperor and the governor for this great honor. Arila watched the overseer closely, praying her name would be called. But as the list came to an end, she still hadn't heard her name. Her heart felt as if it had fallen into an endless abyss. How could this be? She had worked so hard. She didn't understand why she wasn't chosen as one of the active workers. Overseer, I. Arila couldn't hold back any longer and timidly raised her hand, wanting to ask why. Crack. In the next instant, the overseer's whip cracked loudly against the ground, sending a sharp sound through the air. Those on the list, follow me to meet the emissary. The rest of you, get back to the line and keep working. No complaints. If I catch anyone slacking off, I'll make sure you regret it. The overseer glared menacingly at Arila, his eyes warning her. If it hadn't been for the emissary's visit today, and the factory director's specific instructions to be more lenient, the overseer's whip would have already lashed across Arila's back. Seeing the overseer's warning, Arila swallowed her words and dared not speak again. She could only watch the 10 workers with envy as they followed the overseer to meet the emissary. If they passed the inspection, they would get the chance to go to the sacred square. But for Arila, that chance was gone. Choking back her frustration, she wiped away the tears at the corners of her eyes and returned to the production line. Suddenly, the heat on the assembly line seemed unbearable, and the fumes seeping through her broken mask stung her nose terribly. It was as if no one ever cared about her. Even though she had worked so hard, no one ever noticed. No matter how much she felt wronged, she still had to keep working. In her weakened condition, she wondered if one day she might end up like her parents, dying at her station. Maybe only when she collapsed and died on the assembly line would anyone finally notice her. Perhaps they'd even pity her, saying, Arila was such a diligent worker. This workshop has lost one of its best. Her mind wandered, imagining her own death, filling her with sorrow. But the noisy machinery quickly snapped her back to reality. She was still on the clock. She hurriedly resumed her work, murmuring to herself for encouragement. Arila, you're the best worker here. You can do this. Arila. Was someone calling her? Arila was confused. It had been so long since anyone had called her name since her parents had passed. She thought she might have been imagining it. Arila. This time, she was certain someone was calling her, and she quickly turned around. It was the overseer, glaring at her with a stern expression. She panicked. Overseer, I've been working hard. Please, don't punish me. Seeing no response from the overseer, she quickly continued. Is it about my mask? By the Emperor, I accidentally broke it. I swear I won't ask for a replacement, and it won't affect the workshop. The overseer, breathing heavily, said nothing, almost scaring Arila out of her wits. Then, to her shock, the overseer's face broke into a broad smile. Arila, no need to worry. I'm here with some important news for you. The overseer's tone was unnaturally polite, as if afraid of offending her. He had nearly run himself breathless to get here. You need me, for something important. Arila couldn't believe her ears. The overseer was being nice to her. Normally, he would just call her, hey, you. Or worse, that one over there. And strike her with his whip without a second thought. Yes, Arila. Please, follow me quickly. The emissary wants to see you specifically. What? Arila's mind went blank. Though she wasn't the brightest, she knew this was something good. Come quickly now, and the rest of you, get back to work. Anyone slacking will answer to me. The overseer, catching his breath, led Arila away, but not before shouting at the other workers as a matter of habit. Realizing how that might look, he quickly turned back to Arila, speaking softly. Apologies, Arila, I didn't mean to raise my voice and bother your ears. Please forgive my past offenses. The overseer looked as though he might cry, terrified of offending Arila, who had been personally summoned by the emissary. No problem. Arila, still in a daze, followed the overseer toward the reception area, where the emissary and the factory director were waiting. In the factory's reception hall, the director was drenched in sweat as he anxiously faced the 2 emissaries, both dressed in black uniforms, representing the governor himself. These emissaries had the power to execute him on the spot. 2 days ago, the king's court had issued a notice, instructing each region to submit a list of active workers, explicitly warning against any falsification or negligence. If the governor's emissaries found any issues, the offenders would face severe punishment, and in serious cases, execution on the spot. The message from the king's court had been clear. No sane person would dare tamper with this list. The factory director had worked tirelessly, reviewing every name submitted by the overseers, carefully examining the workers' faith and family backgrounds before finalizing the list. To ensure fairness, he had even excluded his own brother-in-law. Yet, there was still a problem. The woman Arila, whom the governor had taken a personal interest in, was not on the list. How could this happen? In fact, Arila's name had been added by Eden on a whim. The other night, Carter had promised Arila he would pass on her feelings to the governor. And true to his word, he had mentioned Arila to Eden. Eden, finding the story amusing, had noted her name. Later, when preparing the list, he had casually added it. What he hadn't expected was the amount of attention it would draw. Upon seeing that Arila had been specifically marked by the governor, Bayev immediately dispatched Deville and Popov to ensure nothing went wrong. That's how the current situation came to be. The factory director was on the verge of collapse, convinced that his life, and his family, was over. There's no need to be afraid. Deville looked at the trembling director and tried to reassure him. Worried that his usual cold expression might be too harsh, he gave the director the smile he had just learned from Popov. Mercy, emissary. By the Emperor's name, I swear the list was thoroughly reviewed. There's no mistake. I had no idea Arila was someone the governor was looking for. With a thud, the factory director dropped to his knees. The emissary's sinister smile made him tremble, certain he was about to be executed. You wretch. Deville was momentarily taken aback. This time, he was genuinely angry, his hand instinctively moving toward his laser pistol. Whoa, Deville, take it easy. Remember to be friendly. We're here to help the workers. Didn't the governor say we should engage with the people? Popov patted Deville on the shoulder, urging him to stay calm. Deville glared at Popov, feeling even more insulted and humiliated. That coward, giving him orders. Chapter 60, The Workers' Representative. HMPH. Deville, though somewhat displeased, held back his frustration. He snorted and stepped aside. After all, Popov was praised by the governor, and Deville was not, at least, not yet. He simply didn't have the qualities the governor needed right now, but he would learn and adapt. For now, he would tolerate that coward for a little while longer. Popov, seeing Deville back down, finally let out a sigh of relief. If Deville had harmed someone unjustly, it could have resulted in a rebuke from the governor. Despite everything, Popov truly cared about Deville. In his mind, he and Deville were like brothers who had survived life and death situations together. Of course, by that, Popov meant that Deville had once saved his life. Popov gently helped the factory director to his feet. Stand up, we're not demons here. As long as there's no falsifying of names to deceive the governor, nothing will happen to you. Popov stared into the director's eyes, but if the list has any issues, we will follow the rules. You may be punished, or even executed. Though Popov had a reputation for being a coward, he was still a certified official of the king's court. His authority, backed by the governor, was no less than that of an enforcer. I swear on my life, the list is correct. The factory director vowed, almost as if swearing an oath. Good. Popov narrowed his eyes and smiled warmly again. Soon after, Arila was led into the room by the overseer. In the room, she saw the normally high and mighty factory director and the two imposing emissaries, both dressed in black. She was so shocked that she didn't know what to say. The factory director quickly introduced her. Emissaries, this is our factory's outstanding worker, Ms. Arila. Emissaries. Arila hurriedly bowed in greeting. Ms. Arila, Popov said, pulling out a small box, we are here on behalf of the governor to invite you to participate in the Emperor's Ascension Festival. In recognition of your excellent performance, the governor's palace has chosen to bestow upon you the title of workers' representative. On the day of the festival, you will lead your factory's workers into the sacred square to receive the Emperor's blessing. This announcement left both Arila and the factory director in shock. A medal bestowed by the governor's palace, what an honor. Even Deville and Popov were a bit envious, as neither of them had received such a medal yet. Of course, that would change if they continued doing their jobs well, and they could aim for even greater honors in the future. The Workers' Representative Medal was something Eden had ordered to be designed, intended for outstanding workers in various fields. Each region would select one or several workers to receive the medal, and the young officials from the new secretarial department would present them. However, Eden had never specified that Arila should receive the Workers' Representative Medal. It was Bayev who had assumed that since her name was specifically added by the governor, her status couldn't be ordinary. So, he arranged for her to receive the honor. Popov carefully opened the box to show everyone its contents. Inside was a red medal with elements of a golden lion and hammer. Arila, overwhelmed with excitement, took the medal and pinned it to her chest. She was so happy that she almost fainted. By the Emperor, not only had the kind governor invited her to the festival, but she was also being rewarded. This was beyond anything she had ever dared to dream. Congratulations, Ms. Arila. Thank you, emissary. And thank you, kind governor. Arila stammered, her words jumbled with excitement, but no one cared about the details. Wearing the medal wasn't the end of it. There would be an official announcement, a ceremony, and her name would be entered into the king's court records. The police would even provide some level of protection for her. The Interior Department would send personnel to teach her how to fulfill her new duties. But all these formalities were beyond Deville and Popov's concern. The factory and the Interior Department would handle the follow-up. Soon, Deville and Popov left the reception area to inspect the list of active workers. Their task was crucial, as they needed to filter out any underperformers or those whose faith was weak. More importantly, they had to identify any bad elements or heretics. After the emissaries left, it was just Arila and the factory director. Arila, still unsure of what to do, said hesitantly. Factory director, should I go back to the production line now? The director, beaming with a smile, quickly stopped her. Ms. Arila, no need to rush back. You should rest here for a bit. Saying this, he personally poured her a glass of water. After all, Arila was now the face of the factory, a representative of the governor himself. There was no way he would send her back to the production line, where she might collapse from exhaustion. The director was already thinking of promoting Arila to a higher management position. Only such a position would be suitable for her now. As soon as a worker received a medal from the governor, their status changed. No matter what their past was, their future would be completely different. They could rise above their previous circumstances and potentially even join the ranks of the nobility one day. It was a glimmer of hope for the downtrodden. This system gave the lower classes a path to ascent. It showed them that no matter their poverty, anyone who worked hard for the king's court and the governor would receive the rewards they deserved. Only through this promise could hope endure. And this was the governor's gift to his people. Arila, this once unfortunate worker, had received that gift. But right now, she had no idea how much this blessing would change her fate. She was simply lost in joy. In just 2 days, she would go to receive the emperor's blessing. And she would even meet the kind governor himself. What would the sacred bread and water taste like? Sitting on the sofa in the reception area, Arila's mind wandered, lost in a daydream. It wasn't until the director spoke again that she came back to her senses. Ms. Arila, the director said sincerely, I've given it some thought. From now on, you won't have to return to that dirty production line. Huh. Arila thought he was about to fire her and quickly pleaded. Director, are you firing me? Please don't. No, no, no. The director was even more panicked than Arila. By the emperor, I would never do that. You're an important representative of this factory. There's no way I'd fire you. Firing Arila, after the governor had just given her a medal. That would be suicide. Really? Arila asked, still unsure. Of course not. The director reassured her, explaining. Ms. Arila, what I meant is that, as a representative of this factory, you deserve a higher position. He took out a form listing the factory's higher management positions. You can choose any position you want. Finally, Arila understood. You're promoting me, and I can choose my own job. This was an unexpected bonus. By the emperor, today was the luckiest day of her life. Yes, Ms. Arila. Please, tell me, what position would you like? Overseer. Arila answered without hesitation. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audiobook to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.